G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 6 of True Blue Conversations with your host Adam Bloom, the author of Easy Target, now available at adambloom.com.au. 8 years ago, after returning from 3 tours of Afghanistan and then gaining experience and education in financial planning, Warren Loudon teamed up with fellow veteran Dave Vaughan and started Loudon and Vaughan Private Wealth, founded with the underlying belief that every person matters and every dollar counts, providing comprehensive tailored financial advice and wealth management services for you and your family. Loudon and Vaughan will guide you towards your financial goals with integrity and transparency. Whether you're planning for retirement, investing for the future, or managing your family's wealth, they've got you covered. Visit loudonandvaughan.com.au or call 02 9538 2704 to book a meeting with Warren today.
I'm joined today by Ben Hosking, a Northern Territory Police tactical veteran, and it's an honour, mate, to sit back with you again and do this for the second time. Yep. Mate, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. And look, let's see just how it goes with the recording this time and see whether or not we can corrupt the files and see if we get this out or not.
That's it. Well, I must say, mate, we'll say that it was corruption on your side.
It was,
not my side. So.
Yeah. Dangerous line to throw at a cop, but former cop. Yeah. I definitely did bungle up the tech on this end of the things. So anyway.
No, mate, it's good to have you on. So, mate, before we get into your career, let's go back to a young Ben. Let's talk about you growing up, life, school, family, and you as a young fella.
Yeah, sure. So, you mentioned that I was in the NT Police and the teams up there, but I am one of those rare commodities in the NT Police Force that's actually born and raised in the Territory, and I think you probably get the born and raised term from most small parochial country towns. Most people will say that, but I grew up in Darwin. My folks, where did we start? We started around Nightcliff area, I suppose. Going to school, Nightcliff Primary, went into high school there. Did a bit of travel around Australia and went to a couple of different places here and there, but sort of most of my life was in the northern suburbs of Nightcliff and the sort of beachier areas of Darwin. The folks ran a tourism business when I was sort of conceived, born, came along, and they were doing that. It was called Photosport, and ran that pretty successfully for a couple of years, and then they had some major mechanical issues with some of the vehicles in their fleet. They ended up declaring bankruptcy and having to foreclose on the business, and world of hurt that I can't even begin to imagine. Even though I lived through it, you don't understand those pressures as a kid. So we ended up going from being a middle class, semi-affluent family with a fair bit of sort of disposable income, I guess, to moving out to Darwin River Dam, where at like the age of 6 or 7, I was living in a house that had 4 steel posts and a tin roof, a corrugated iron roof. My bed was like a single spring mattress on an old beat up rusty frame, and I had a mozzie net for a cover at night. Yeah, breakfast would be boiled milk on a billy over the campfire. And a bath in the morning would be walking to the local creek and having a plunge in the running river there, or running creek there, and then catching the bus to school. So I sort of went from growing up in a pretty comfortable lifestyle to a pretty intense survival-based requirement. So I think at that seminal age, that sort of 6, 7, really developing into realising the world outside of just you're coming out of that selfish 4-year-old sort of toddler to 4, getting into being a little bit more aware of the world. It was all about just getting through the next day. Like there were no luxuries whatsoever. There was no car. There was, there was literally nothing. I was having boiled milk for my Weet-Bix, and not like cold milk from the fridge like some kids would have experienced. Not to say that didn't come back in life, they certainly turned their lives around over time, but that really stuck with me, like going from having a level of comfort to almost disappearing into poverty, to be frank. So we did that. Then they built their way out of that. We had to move down to Perth for a while to get some help from the old man's parents. The old man, he is Italian by birth, but comes from East Africa. My nono and my nonna were over there after the war. and then emigrated over to Australia, to Perth, and so sort of stayed there, and the old man grew up there and then eventually moved up to Darwin. So we went down to Perth, spent a bit of time down there. Parents ended up getting back on their feet. We moved back to Darwin for work and continued to grow up there until I suppose, got to 15, 16, moved out of home when I was 16. Parents had a pretty messy relationship. It was not the nicest of relationships between the two of them. I dealt with it in my own ways. I was a bit of a problem child, massive partier, drinker, getting out, getting up to trouble, probably doing a whole bunch of illegal shit that I shouldn't, that I won't bring up on tape. And then, so I moved out at home. Then when I was 16, I was still at school full-time. I was working full-time at Woolies. Big shout-out to being a checkout chick and any of the other checkout chick dudes out there like me. And then the old man sort of spoke to me about 18, 19 years of age, and I wasn't really going anywhere. I dropped out of school. I'd gone and done a personal training qualification. I'd started a bachelor's at university in psychology, and I was in my first semester of psychology, and the old man said to me, look, I don't know if that's where you really want to be. I don't know if that's your passion, but perhaps you could look at the NT Police. The O'Sullivan Review had just been finished. Mm-hmm. There was a massive deficiency in the NT Police. I think 200 positions available. They were desperate for people, and I was desperate for adventure, and the two interests aligned, and thankfully those suckers took me. Thank you, NT Police. Commissioner White, I believe it was at the time. So yeah, I started my journey in the NT Police. I didn't get in until I was 20 years old.
So brothers and sisters? You had brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So brothers and sisters. Got an older brother, Zach.
Yep.
Got a younger sister, Molly. Zach is still in the Northern Territory. My little sister's in Melbourne.
Yep.
Yeah, we grew up together. There's a bit of a difference between us. There's 7 or 8 years between each of us.
Yeah, okay.
So,
and you say that, like, I just want to go back a minute where, you've gone from this, as you say, comfortable early existence in your life to how did your brother and sister cope with that as well? And for you guys, do you look back on it now as, well, this is really the first time you had to sort of get a little bit of resilience in life in your early years? And what do you guys look back on that now and go, that was just how it was meant, like that was how the card was dealt at that time? Yeah, look,
Molly wasn't around at the time. She came along after we left Perth.
Yep.
For us, it was just a matter of fact. There was no choice in the matter. You're a kid without agency or without any advocacy or power. You're just subject to the whims and will of your parents. And so for me, it was it was just making do with the absolute bare minimum or whatever I could get a hold of. So, like, for instance, instead of maybe playing on a Sega or whatever it was Nintendo at the time, it was getting on the BMX and creating a track through the bush, laying down planks of wood, carving paths through trees, and playing soldier, and it was the old school self play sort of entertain yourself side of things. So yeah, look, I think what that does to you is it changes you from there's no need to compete with anyone in that environment. All you're trying to do is survive. You're not trying to be better than the next person, because you've literally come from having stuff where it was competition play, or where you were trying to outdo each other at the school or whatever, to just like, I just need to get to school. Like, I'm not worried about whether or not I'm smashing A's and B's or C's or whatever. It's like, I'm just trying to get there. I'm just trying to get through. So,
and survive.
Yeah. So I think it sets a tone in your personality pretty strong, pretty early on, that we're all narcissistic to a degree. Vanity's an amazing metric to get yourself fitter. All those things apply to everyone, and I'd be, arrogant as hell to say that doesn't. But there's also an element where I'm more interested in just getting done what I'm trying to work on, because it's about me getting through to the next part of whatever I need to do. So whether or not that's a work project or a personal project, it's about me just completing that and finishing it, not about whether or not I did it better or worse than somebody else.
And now that you're a dad, does it make you appreciate and say to your kids, don't be caught up on the materialistic things in life, because they can just go like that?
Yeah, I think it gives you a bit of a harder edge, because when you've had nothing, when you're literally, when you're boiling water to have fresh water and you've carried it from the river, chop the wood, carry the water, like that stays with you forever. And probably to the detriment for these kids because they live a pretty good life. Right, we're here on the Sunshine Coast. They just hopped out of their, grandfather's, pool in a beautiful house about 5 minutes from the beach. How do you compare that to me being their age, and then for me to go and have a shower, it was literally like walk to the creek, or to get fresh water, it's like carry the water from the creek back and then boil it. Like there's no comparison without exposure or experience. And I think that it's that classic walk a mile in another man's shoes. If you've got no exposure, like if you've never seen it, there's no way you'll be able to appreciate it. That the dinner table discussion of eat your meat and veggies because there's kids in Africa. Fuck off. No, like kids can't see kids in Africa unless they go there and live with the kids in Africa, and then they can sense it and understand it.
That's right.
Tell them that story is a waste. So I try not to be as maybe bitter or jaded about that sort of part of my life with them as I can, but I still get frustrated when I have to argue with them about, no, you can't have an ice cream today when we come back from the beach because I'm just saying you just don't need one.
Yeah, that's right. Well, mate, it's your upbringing's not too dissimilar to Dan Kieran, Victoria Cross.
Right.
Like he, in his early years, he was out, dirt floor and shack sort of living as well. So, and mate, look what, and for you, I look at that, he says it that the army sort of saved and made him, and going from a life of crime and where you are, like, did you have any, like,
was I going off the rails if I didn't go to the police?
No.
Probably.
Like, did you look at going the military, or was it always for you just that I wanted to be? Because where did that sense of service come from to join the police instead of going the military path?
I think first of all it came through mates. So my best man that was there when I got married, Garth, he's still serving. He was intent on joining the military from a very early age. He was the cadets guy, did all that sort of stuff, signed up at 17. I was on track for something similar, mainly because I was lost. Service had run in the family. I think my father is the first person not to actively serve. He was in the cadets when he was going through school and that sort of stuff, but he never went into service, primarily because a bit of a convoluted story, but growing up in East Africa, there was a dictator that took over. I think it's Robert Mugabe, I believe, at the time. Took over where they were growing up. They were in engineering construction. His old man had served. So had his mum. She'd served in intelligence. So he was about that 15, 16 age group. So he couldn't really, because they immigrated to Australia and they were going through that whole process. And then he just went down the tertiary education direction, becoming a social worker. And so service had been there. My grandfathers had served. It was always sort of floating around the back of my mind. I wanted to go and do what Garth was doing. But then speaking to my mum about it, and I'm happy to say that I'm a pretty big softie and I love my mum, and she's...
Mate, I am too.
Yeah, she's my absolute hero.
I'm a mummy's boy.
Yeah, I've seen what she's done, and it blows me away that a woman could raise kids the way she did, and with still a positive outlook after going through the hell that they've been through, her specifically. And she was like, no, I would rather you not join the military. I don't want to see my son get killed. And I was, at the time, you're like, no, I'm not going to die. I'm, 18 and bulletproof. And I guess that's where the conversation about the police sort of took its sway on me, because it was still service in a paramilitary environment. I knew from the moment that I joined the police that I wanted to get into TRG. That was the coolest part of the police in my mind, was like kicking indoors and blowing shit up. So I guess I wasn't driven to be of service at the time, but it was certainly in the back of my mind.
And I think too, it's ironic, mate, that you say that to your mum, where she didn't want you to join the military where you could die. The police is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. Well,
you're probably more at risk of committing suicide these days if you join the police. It's a fucking sad statistic. And when we did our last podcast on the Files Corrupted, it wasn't really front of mind. But Christmas Day, one of our brothers from the Blue Line took his life in the Northern Territory, and
sorry to hear, mate.
Yeah, and that's the reality. Like, you might not. In Australia, we have a very safe life. We have a very secure environment. Yes, there's crime. Yes, it's out of control. Yes, juvenile justice is a joke, and all those sorts of things. I get it, and I'm not talking about that. We can get into that later on. But if you were to compare policing in Australia to policing in America, it's chalk and cheese. And if you were to compare service, like Defence Force service, to law enforcement service, again, chalk and cheese. What I think doesn't get said enough is that for those on the blue line, the risk of you dying in Australia is a lot less than, say, being deployed overseas and getting into a contact. However, you're going to shift every single day you're working. And yes, I get it. Guys in the Defence Force are going to work every day as well, but they're going to work with their mates and they're going to work in a relatively safe environment, excluding the training mishaps that can happen. They're going to work in a space that they're required to train for a very lethal purpose, and I totally acknowledge that. But when you're in the job, when you're on the front line, whether it's, fireys, ambos, whatever, you're literally putting yourself in harm's way to solve other people's problems every shift that you work. And I tried to think about, I don't think I had too many near-death experiences in the police, but I did try to think about a while back how many fights I would have had. And I think probably because of the work that I do in executive protection at the moment, you see a lot of people come into this space or into this security space that talk about, how tough they are and what they've done. But I think until you've worked, 365 days in a year, working as much overtime as you possibly can in the bush of the Northern Territory, getting involved in, heated domestic violence incidents with, alcoholics who are carrying edge weapons or blunt force trauma, options, and you are sort of defending yourself or, having to take people into custody, which means depriving them of their liberty. You truly don't get a sense of, what people are capable of in the way of, person-to-person violence. And we sort of, talk about the risks associated with being a police officer. It's relentless. And I think that difference is that the cumulative build-up of the pressure from dealing with that, let alone the internal politics and getting railed by, the commissioned officers that you got to report up to, or the court of public opinion that trials you, as certain police officers from the Northern Territory have absolutely been ruined by. That sort of stuff doesn't affect you in the same way that it affects police.
And we'll get into, because I know we'll get into a few things that have happened later on in the podcast with and around that, and I'm looking forward to diving deep into how woke policing's gone and all that sort of stuff. But mate, talk me through the process back 2006. You joined the NT police, and what was that process back then?
Well, it's a bit like getting your license in the Northern Territory. It's just a lucky. No, it's not lucky. It was fairly drawn out. It's that typical online. It was sort of like when the internet was coming in, not coming in, but around. So, the application started with downloading the PDF, filling the PDF, emailing that off, getting your CV, the same sort of stuff. And then it goes into, the rounds of interviews, the psychometric testing, medical, pretty standard for most police forces, I guess, having sort of spoken to different people. There was a massive recruitment drive on at the time, so not that it was like a desperation thing, but they were absolutely trying to get the numbers up, which was probably on my side. Being a 20-year-old, I didn't really have a great deal of life experience. I look back now and I think I probably had no fucking right applying for the police at that age. I think the older you get, the more you realise you don't, the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in more. You realise you know less and less, and you need to learn more and more. And at 20, I guess you're gifted with that bulletproof and invincible mindset that you can just go and do whatever you want to do and you're going to help people. Probably not the case.
Well, they still, mate, I think they say that for males, our brain doesn't fully develop till we're 30. Like, and maybe
even
then I still say
I'm still going.
But I think back then, like, 20 is so young, mate, to go, righto, here you go. You're now going to
You're now a sworn officer of the law. Here's a firearm and the authority to make a ruling over someone's life that could put them before a court. Like incredible amounts of responsibility. I'm thankful I did it. I'm thankful that I had some incredibly good mentors. There were a lot of guys that came up from VicPol and were doing their transition ARP course at the same time. Yeah, so I got in. I did 6 months at the college, the police college.
Was that hard?
Yeah, I think it was for me. I was in the middle of studying that bachelor's of psychology. So I'd already got my head back into study, but the difference now was it was verbatim. So it's not like perspective, opinion, and questions. It's you must know this legislation word for word.
Yep.
I didn't even know what verbatim meant until I went to the college, and there was a couple of guys from the army that were, coming across after doing their service, were taking the piss out of it. And I was like, what the fuck is verbatim?
Yeah.
And then I realised it's 100% on your test, or you get a pink slip, fuck off.
Yep.
So, went through the college, did the 6 months there, which was, a lot of heavy legislation, like I said, verbatim, some tests being 100% or complete failure, firearms specifically.
How are you at the shooting
Yeah, I mean,
were you all right?
I'd never been a shooter. I'd never been interested in it. I'm still not a massive gun guy. Like, I mean, even having been in a tactical team, I'm not a massive gun guy. I love shooting, but because it's time and attention and focus as opposed to, pulling the trigger. The shooting was, I was average. I wasn't anything special. Driving, I almost failed, which is ironic because we now run a driver enhancement course. No. So I did get put on notice for that, so I had to put in more attention. I think, the reason those things, I was average and I almost failed is because I basically was just sort of flying by the seat of my pants. And it took a couple of guys gripping me up and saying, "Oh, pull your fucking head in. You're going out there to be a cop. You're not just some fucking teenager." Because I guarantee 20 years old, I still had a teenager mindset.
Yeah.
Got through that, the use of force options, all that sort of stuff. I enjoyed it. I was a pretty physical guy. Like, I played sports growing up, soccer, footy, cricket, rugby, did a bit of boxing. So that was all good. One of the commissioners who actually my best man's dad, Graham Kelly, he was an assistant commissioner at the time. He said, "Mate, you're single, you join the police, don't you dare stay in Darwin. It's initiation by fire, cut your teeth, go down to Tennant Creek, volunteer. Don't be one of those wankers that send someone with a family out bush." So I was like, I guess I got no option. Finished the college and went to Tennant Creek. Volunteered, was keen to get there. Like, I just wanted to fucking rip in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and you had the 200 go through with you? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and so, mate, what was it like for your proud moment? You're marching out, like you're a sworn copper, your mum and dad came and your family come up to see you?
Yep. I would recommend anyone that wants to get into any industry later in life, go and serve, because the sense of accomplishment of having achieved that rank and role, even though it's the beginning rank, it's the fact that it's a community recognizing your efforts. That feeling of empowerment is incredible, and it definitely catapulted me in a better direction than where I was going. I've got some incredible mates that I grew up with in the Territory, and some of them have thoroughly succeeded in life, and others have not had that same luck, and they all had different places to start.
So, mate, you head out bush, Tennant Creek, and talk me through, because, and this is where I want to deep dive, because you're policing in a different, and this may sound controversial to some people, but you've got a different demographic. You're dealing with Aboriginals that are out in and it's different, and
it's in community.
It's not like normal policing, and I'm not saying, it's not, we're not in the Sunshine Coast where Tennant Creek, where it's
there's a big difference between Sunshine Coast and Tennant Creek.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, mate. Because
it's not just the red dirt.
It's a different demographic, different crimes, and mate, why did you want to go bush?
I wanted to go bush because I wanted the biggest challenge I could find. Even now, I'm motivated by adventure and challenge. Like watching the Sydney to Hobart launch, that's like, hey, if anyone's out there and wants someone to crew for the Sydney to Hobart, I grew up sailing and I'm absolutely keen. Why'd I go to Tennant Creek? Because I wanted the absolute biggest challenge I could. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to see whether or not I was capable of policing in... There was only 4 options in the Northern Territory when you come out of the college, and going to Tennant Creek was considered the shittest one, or the hardest spot to go to, I suppose. It had a bit of street cred. So I was like, I want to go and do that. I want to go and test myself. Graham had said that's initiation by fire. Here's a guy who'd served out there in the Gold Squad. He knew it intimately like the back of his hand. I was like, that's where I'm going to go. I want to go and test myself. How is it different? Well, I would say from a first-hand perspective, you go out there as a police officer, and this is on reflection, not notes at the time, trust me. The generational hopelessness from the White Australia policy through to the Centrelink handouts have completely crippled an entire population that existed in a completely different environment than settled down communities funded by the government to maintain them for the sake of providing them government services. And so when you go out bush, and I'm talking like settlements, not the communities that have been established in town like Whooper Camp or any of that sort of stuff, but if you go bush, there's Aboriginal people living out there thriving. You come into town and you throw a bit of sit-down money in, you throw a bit of alcohol, some drugs, you get a whole bunch of people that wouldn't traditionally be in each other's company, different clans, different tribes, and then it's just a melting pot. And it's a melting pot for reckless antisocial behaviour that impacts generations in a really negative way. So, the things that we're dealing with on a daily, aggravated assaults against women, unlawful entries by kids, rapes, stolen vehicles, murders, wild. I can remember going to a job in Tennant Creek. I was still a probie Connie at the time, and this 17-year-old Sheila had used a spam can and severed the temporal artery of a woman that she was having an argument with by caving her head in with this spam can. And I got to the job and there was a pool of blood on the ground that would have been as thick as this, fold-out table that we've got in front of us that we're sitting at. Like it was fucking 2 inches thick of blood on the grass in a pool that would have been, as big as an A4 page spread out 3 times. And I was just looking at it going, what the fuck do I do here? Like, first aid, schmerst aid.
Yep.
Well, I'm gonna put some pressure on this artery. I was just thankful that the Ambos turned up when they did. Big shout out to Ambos, another frontline respondent that gets fuck all recognition for the stuff that they do and goes through a hell of a hard time with, the mental health during and post service.
Yep.
I could not be more thankful that these guys turned up. And, Julie, the Ambo on duty, she was a lifesaver. Literally, that woman stayed alive because of what Julie was able to do. I was just stood there like, with a dick in my hand, fucking looking like a tool.
Was that, and we'll get into it a little bit later with that was where you started to, was it from that scene that you started to really want to learn more about and becoming not a liability, an asset to go, actually, I want to learn more about TACMed and all this sort of stuff to actually save people? Yeah,
spot on. I was absolutely gung-ho. I was involved in a bunch of critical incidents in Tennant Creek. I got recognition early on in my career that for those that have a fight or flight reflex, I have the fight reflex. That's not an ego thing. That's just a comfortable, I recognise quite honestly that when shit's going down, I'm happy to go towards it. And that's been recognised by people beyond myself. The benefit of that is that you seem to always be a shit magnet and you're always finding yourself in the trouble at the best times of your life. And with policing, often there's catastrophic hemorrhages or, you've got, chest wounds with, some sort of sucking or penetrating wound trauma. So to me, after being involved in a couple of riots, and I'm talking about being in riots in Tennant Creek where it's 400 locals gathered fighting and there's 3 cops and there's no backup. It's like the only way to get backup in that environment is to call more cops out, which takes time, or you have to shut the watch house, leave the prisoners in the watch house and bring a guy in from the watch house, which has happened in the past. Like the first time I tasered someone was at a riot, and I can remember going to this job and myself and Drew, we roll up in this camp. It's at, tin sheds at Kangaroo Camp, notorious high levels of violence. I've been a number of riots there with more people than I could count, and we roll up to this job and there's a fight going on. We go in, and as often happens with domestics with, a lot of family members, when the police arrive, the family members turn on you. And we turn up and we go to grab the first guy, turns into a fight. We're at the back of the cage, the knuckles start flying and we end up on the ground. We're trying to apprehend him and put him in the back of the cage. And as we do it, I just remember looking up and just seeing this sky full of bundies, rocks as big as your head, just fucking inbound. And I just looked up and thought, I'm going to fucking die. I'm going to die trying to arrest some dickhead who was having a fight with his family. Anyway, thankfully, a couple of them, hit us and scon us, but they don't do any serious damage. So Drew and I would jump up, and as we're sort of, step dragging back, the tactical disengagement stuff, away from our vehicle now because it's been overwhelmed. We're stepping back, the crowd's coming in on us, we're still getting pelted with bundies. We'd only just been issued with X26s, the tasers, and I was like, right, okay, well, here's an option. Lethal force is presented. I've got people trying to kill me. The, parity disparity, numbers at play. So I draw my taser, one cartridge, click, bang, drop the first guy. He goes down. And because it's the first time I've ever fired a taser, in my mind, I'm like, fuck, I've just tasered someone, which is equivalent to lethal use of force. I need to then render assistance. I'm not counting 1,000, 2,000. I'm just like, fuck, I've got to get in there. And as I go to do it, I go to discharge the cartridge so I can recharge it so it becomes an effective tool again. I'm thinking I've got him subdued and we can go in. He's going to stay, like junior cop, rookie shit, right? For all the use of force instructors out there, please feel free to critique. I'm happy to take it. So I go to recharge the cartridge and it's less than 5 seconds and I cracked myself in the hand with the continued volts so that it's still dropping 50k volts every second, right? So I get a wallop in the hands and I'm like, fuck, and I toss the taser aside and I go in, I'm like, fuck it, I can't deal with the taser and the bad guy. I've got to go in and deal with the bad guy. So like complete sensory overwhelm. I know there's no backup coming.
Yep.
We've called for it. We got the sergeant, maybe around the corner. So we go in and I go to arrest this guy, Michael, I think his name was at the time. And as I go in towards him to cuff him, I look up to my left and I see this guy, George, and he is running at me with a fucking log ready to caper toss it at me. It would have been, half the height of a man. I was like, where did you find that? In the middle of this riot, where did you find a log to toss at me, you prick? And so I'm down on one knee and I'm like getting ready to cuff up this dude, Michael, on the ground. And then George is running at me. I'm like, fuck. So I get up and taser's gone, right? I've fucked that off. And I've literally got no option other than I can either shoot this prick or I can run away. So I'm at a point of indecision. So I draw my firearm, I get my firearm up and out on him, and I've got initial trigger pressure on the Glock, and I've just got it depressed. And Drew is beside me, and I can't remember whether or not we said anything or what happened, but there was just a moment of recognition of like, I don't want to go to the coroner's court for what is basically just a bunch of, dudes that are blind drunk getting angry at the cops because we tried to lock up their brother, cousin, uncle, whatever it was. I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to court for this. We're going to hightail it. So I lifted finger off the trigger, high port, and literally just turned and fucking sprinted. So me and Drew are running down the hill. This dickhead keeps chasing. Look, I had my gun out pointed at this guy's head and he still kept going. And I'm calling him to surrender on the police and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so he chases us down the hill and I remember turning around. We get to the bottom of the hill. I'm like, we've got nowhere to go now. We're literally in the bush. We got nowhere to go. There's no one else here. It's me and Drew, and there's 1,000 people. It's either fight to the death or like there's no retreat because we're literally going to get into the bush and get separated. So I turn around. I go to take up trigger pressure on this guy who's still chasing me, and then it's at that point that he recognises I got a gun pointed at him, and he's like tosses this log at me. Real piss poor attempt. I step to the side. And then I realise there's no threat anymore, so I just holster the firearm, not from him. I holster the firearm. I take a survey of the land around me, and all the guys that were trying to kill us before are now back at the car. The car is annihilated. Old mate that I tasered is gone. I can see my taser laying down up there, so I'm like, okay, well, at least no one's got any weapons against us that could be used. Yeah. It's just bundies and madness. And so I can remember at this point, I get my baton out, and I'm like, it's time to unleash hell. And I hear the troopy, the 79 series, cruising in. So here comes Rolly, the sergeant. He comes screaming in. No, I think it was Bales. He comes screaming in. And so we've now got an element of more presence. There's another police car. And then I hear on the radio that we've got the watch house is closed and the watch house keepers coming out as well. So we're 4 cops, luxury, right? Instead of 2, 4 cops instead of 1,000. I'm like, right, it's fucking time to pay. So I got the baton out, I flick it out, and it's just an extendable ass baton. I'm like, right, I'm going for the knees. I'm going to take out a couple of these pricks and lock them up. So as I'm running back up the hill to re-engage, because the sergeant's driven to the car. He can't see us, right? He's gone to the largest thing, which is the vehicle with the lights on. He's gone up there. He's seen that it's just busted. He gets out and he starts looking around and he gets into a melee straight away. He's got the party pack. He's spraying about 6 or 7 people. I run up with a baton and just start going for knees. And I'm like taking people down left and right. Yeah. So I reckon we got about 4 or 5 out of that. So we locked up 4 or 5. Assembly right, whatever the legislation was under the Crim Code. Picked them all up for that. I remembered it all, sort of petered out after that. After the Sarge rocked in and then after the watch house keeper turned up, everyone sort of realised they were in the shit, all the guys that were throwing bundies at us. So they all pissed off into the bush, didn't want the fight anymore. And I remember getting back in that Hilux. We had to get the spare key out from the station because they'd pinched the key from it after we'd left it in situ. we were fucked, right? We'd just been in a massive blue. The sun had managed to go down over the period of time it had been since we started this biff, And Drew and I were like, fuck it, let's just go and get a Coke before we go back to the station,
Yeah.
whatever it was. So we went to the service station, and there's this police car parked at the service station at BP in Tennant Creek, if anyone knows it. Just bastard as fuck. Looked like it's been in a rollover. It's that fucked up. And we get back in and we drive it back to the police station, and we get people driving past us, giving us a honk and a wave. And I was like, well, I guess that's just another day on the job.
Mate, and this is the thing that I love doing these podcasts because, mate, it's not a normal job. Like, this is not a normal, like, and this is the thing of people that think
That's
policing's-
one shift.
That's
mate.
one shift.
That's
Like,
one shift in Tennant Creek at the start of my career, let alone. And this is the thing that I love about frontline responders. Most of them love telling a war story because then someone else gets to tell a war story.
Yeah.
But it becomes this like element of competition. This ain't a competition between any frontline responders. This is literally just a story of like the madness that ensues in Tennant Creek.
100%. And for you, like, and I want to.
Jimmy.
So, mate, I want to talk about, especially for young coppers that listen to this out there now,
Yeah.
how important are good TOs, mate? And you got out to Tennant Creek, and did you have good TOs that taught you?
Yeah, mate. Looked, and to clarify, TOs, training officers. Yeah. On the road, the ones that I had, I mentioned the Victorians before. So I had John Ganane, Jed Matheson, Craig Bailey, Andrea Davis, Rudy Jamison as well. You know, all integral to my training and getting started. From the territory, at Andy Baldwin, Mick Hansen, a couple other guys there that were all sort of like led the charge on like the old school policing and the way to do things properly, and not nothing below board, all above board, legitimate, genuine, high integrity policing, which was something that I was really appreciative of. The level of competence that you get, it's a shortcut, right? When you get a good mentor, when you get someone who can coach you, who can show you how to do things properly, is a shortcut to success. It's their success from their hard-earned lessons. When I got to Tennant Creek, we had Megan Rowe as a senior sergeant, who had been one of the integral detectives involved in the apprehension of Peter Falconio murder, Bradley Murdoch.
Mm-hmm.
The level of education and support and assistance that you get from those who are a step ahead of you in the game is off the hook. It is, and is the only reason you get to be, I think, as good as you get to is because of the people around you that take an interest in helping you develop. And I think for anyone that's that next step ahead in their career now, they if they had any assistance along the way, they owe it to the people that are starting out to give them a hand as well.
Because I know I've spoken to some TOs can be lazy, and it either makes or breaks what you do as a whether you're a proactive police officer or you sit back and wait and react. Like it's
spot on. Look, I study leadership professionally at the moment. I'm going through my masters in leadership, and one of the things that I was just going through recently was when you've got a group of people and the leadership tolerates a low performer, all the high performers in the group sink to a level of absent-mindedness, nonchalant, laissez-faire approach to things because they see that poor behaviour, poor effort, poor execution is tolerated, and because they see that, they effectively think, well, why would I work harder? And when you've got a high-performing team, when you've got people around you that are giving it a red-hot crack, that are doing things properly, that are spending the effort to make things turn out the best that they possibly can, you get an incredibly high-performing team, especially when there's accountability and people are held to those requirements. The benefit of policing when you've got a detective like Megan who was in charge of running the station is that the expectation was that you were on top of your game 110% of your time. I got criticised because I wasn't particularly good at domestic violence stuff. Whilst I was going to these jobs, I didn't really have a great understanding of it. Maybe the attention to detail wasn't there because I was 20 years old. So I get put into an environment where I'm doing plainclothes investigations into domestic violence, and my skills and abilities went through the roof because I'm held to a higher standard in CIB than I was on the road. And that's what I saw, was that attention to detail, time and effort, that's where you really get good.
So did you ever think, you went down the tactical path, but did you ever think of going down the detective path, or?
Yeah, I think for me, I always wanted to go to TRG because it was the cool place to go, but my end goal was to end up in a place called SOS, which was Special Operations Sections, which was targeting organised crime and, for whatever it is up there, gangs, task force, that sort of stuff. the reality for me was, whilst I was doing my time in TRG, that section closed down. So I ended up just staying in TRG.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I thought that would be, that looked like the best place to go. A few of my mates went down to the detective path. One of my best mates went down that pathway, and one of endless best mates went down that pathway.
They're still in?
Yeah. Look, I maintain a really close connection to a lot of guys that still serve, whether they're demons or they're propeller heads or they're knuckle draggers in the cave, or just good old jacks on the road. Look, I take my hat off to anyone that is of service, giving service, or has done service, and I respect them, and I think it's a noble and an admirable thing to do with your life.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit further down, because I love where we, in part one, mate, where we got juicy with all that, and we're gonna get juicy with that again. And do you remember, like you talked about that arrest of you got those 4 guys, and it was 1,000 against 4, which bloody hell. But do you remember your first arrest?
My first arrest? I don't reckon I do. I do remember the first time I put someone in protective custody. So, there's a distinct difference there. Protective custody under the Police Administration Act is just placing someone in custody for their own welfare. They're so intoxicated they can't look after themselves, and there's no sober relative or person to look after them. So you place them in protective custody to take them back to the watch house, where the police can keep an eye on them, because police are basically doctors and field surgeons, and they should be in charge of looking after intoxicated people. So dear policing. Yeah, look, that was a non-event. We were literally just driving along the back streets of Tennant Creek. I was with Marion at the time, my partner, and we come across a group of like 6 people just drinking in the park, and one couldn't get up when we got out of the police car, and so that person was a person who couldn't stand, and therefore needed to go in protective custody. So it's like that's some major event in my policing career to sort of start the road of taking people into custody. But I reckon it probably would have been like an arrest would have been like a traffic offence or like an aggravated assault. The 2 of the most common things in the territory. And
for you, like, do you remember your first time that you had to deal with death? And was there a how did it get better throughout? Obviously, you went tactical, but in those early years of being, like, was there any support for you, or did that sort of lack a bit? Yeah,
good question. I think I've had a couple of different exposures to death, and it's left me with some different thoughts on it than where I started. My old man gave me some advice coming from a social worker's perspective of any trauma you see, whether first-hand, secondary or tertiary, has a vicarious impact on you. So if it's first-hand trauma to you, you can't escape from it. It's happening to you. You've got to deal with it. If it's second-hand trauma, it's happened to someone else and you've turned up to the scene. You're like a sponge. Not all of it's going to go in, but bits and pieces you're going to soak up. If it's tertiary and you're hearing about it or you're seeing it from third hand, it's not as impactful. If it's on the next level and it's imaginative and creative, like a TV or a movie, you might hit a trigger in your mind, but it's very unlikely to have an impact on you. The first death that I ever went to was, in my mind, a good death. It was an older man in the community, well respected. I knew the family. I still have a relationship with the family, just because the territory is a small place. And he passed in his sleep, and it was peaceful. And he went in his own home, he went in his own bed, and we went there and respectfully and politely removed him to the morgue. And it was simple. Other deaths, more traumatic. I tried to not involve myself deeply in the scene. So if I had to go and view or whatever it might be, then that was the case. But if I didn't have to, I'd stay at arm's length from having to see a body or from being exposed to it. Because I am a massive believer in taking other people's knowledge and leveraging it for my own success. My old man told me that it was going to be traumatic and cause vicarious damage to me just by exposure. Well, then I'll trust that advice. I don't need to test whether or not he's right or he's wrong. I'll just accept that this guy who's been around more deaths than me, especially growing up in Africa, knows a bit about it. So I'll just listen. So, those were some of the more peaceful happenings. For some reason, I sat down last night. Me and the kids were talking about something. I sat down last night and I just started drawing, and I literally drew the scene from a murder-suicide that I went to. It's the first time I've ever done any art in any kind of my life. Like, I'm not an artistic person. And I just sat down with a lead pencil and started drawing the murder scene. And it's amazing how uncanny that scene came back to. I'm not an artist by any means. But it was amazing how uncanny that came back to me. And that's a secondhand trauma, right? Like, I get called out on a Sunday to go to this murder-suicide where a mother's, stabbed her 2 children to death outside their caravan. I believe she might have even been a doctor. I can't remember exactly, but she was like a well-educated woman, but went off the rails. She was a mental defect, whatever, hearing voices, who knows? Out comes a squeaky elbow on the sharp point, and she starts toweling up her kids. They get murdered. They're both under, 10, similar ages to my kids at the time when I got called to the scene. And we're line searching past this crime scene all day long, looking for anything else. And like, that stuff sticks with you. What do you get from it? Usually you get some pissant phone call from some fucking ivory tower psych that will call you and say, "Are you okay? Do you need to speak to anyone?" Like, every time I ever got a phone call from someone in that space, I genuinely just wanted to tell them to fuck off.
Because they're not at the coalface. They don't understand.
Not even the coalface. If you don't have like, I've just gone to a dead body. I've turned up to a dead body, or I've fucking gone something and dealt with something quite serious. A phone call is pretty fucking pathetic.
Come out and see me.
Yeah, come and see me. And I don't care if you don't come out and see me the next day. Don't just hit your marker and tick off the box that you've critical incident. I've called the police officer, and he said he doesn't want any counselling. Of course he doesn't want any counselling. He fucking doesn't like you. He don't know you. He doesn't trust you, and he doesn't like you. Or she. Insert he, them, she, whatever it is. It drives me up the wall that that's the level of support that you get. And like, there's no follow-up. But then if you're a copper and you go out and say, "Oh yeah, I'm fucking suffering from PTSD," or I'm fucked in the head, or whatever it is, I've got the fifth syndrome, mate. I made mention of that young fellow that passed over Christmas. You get that phone call from going to one traumatic scene. You don't get another phone call. There's no like follow-up. "Oh, hey, how you going?" 6 months later. Well, like, the shooting I was involved in 2015, I had them contact me maybe the Monday after I shot the guy on the Friday. That's the only time I've ever heard from anyone in the police about, "Hey, are you okay?" The best response I've ever seen from the NT police, and I can only say that because that's my .gov service, is the chaplain. The chaplain taking the time to come around, have a barbecue, catch up with the guys in the office, just be present until someone wants to talk to them. Not because they're massively religious, but because that's who they're there. That's what they're there for. They're there to talk. But if you're just some psych sitting in an office, take it from me, no one likes you.
And we wonder why, mate, we're losing cops in droves to resign and get out because of that exact. They don't feel supported, mate. There's no support.
They don't, and they won't, and it'll continue to deteriorate because you've now got an attitude from departments where if you're wearing a body-worn camera and you make a mistake, they're going to review all of your body-worn footage, and you're now going to be held accountable for every decision. And so you should be held accountable for every decision. But if, say, it's 5 years historically since that event, there was no complaint, and then your internal department hunts you down, creates an offence, and then gives you a show cause, you've now got people that are defending their livelihood while having to go out there and defend society. So they're defending themselves from society that they're standing in the front of and on the coalface of to defend. All the while, they've got a leadership structure that isn't supported by any means. And if they bullshit and say, "Well, it's a show cause, I'm giving them an opportunity to protect their job," no, you're not. You're hunting them for the actions that they've taken, historically that's past muster, and you're going back to approach them about whether or not they should continue in your employment. You're going to have massive atrophy in the police force. And I know from talking to guys that are still in, what used to be the development of a police officer over a 5, 6, 7 year career to get into investigations or like a senior level of administration, you're now getting people that are turning up with 6, 18 months because the timeline to get someone is so much harder, and the maturity of police officers isn't there because people are leaving earlier or they're not sticking around after that first time they're prosecuted.
Mate, my cousin just resigned after 8 years. He had enough, and he was a New South Wales copper. And I said to him, I go, "Jay, why are you getting out?" And he just said, "Mate, why would I stay?" He said, "I've seen enough death, enough murders, enough rapes, domestic violence." And he said, "Mate, I've been threatened with my own life." And he said, "Mate, why would I do it? He's like, I just don't want. And he said, mate, I want to tuck my kids in every night at home. And he's like, I just don't want to do that anymore. And mate, he said, I'm burnt out after 8 years, mate. Done, like finished. And
it's global as well, Adam. Like your cousin's talking about the same thing that globally police officers are talking about. It's the same problem in the United States. I travel to the States for work. I interact with a lot of former police officers, current serving police officers. Same with the UK. We've got a lot of guys coming over from the UK that we're working with. We're talking to about what their law enforcement careers are like. And a lot of us who have served in the job, we absolutely love the police force. I still bleed blue. I still give a shit. Like I still really care. I want to see people in the police succeed. I want to see the police be the organisation that we respect and love. They provide an incredible service that's necessary and required.
Well, without police, mate, we're a lawless society. Imagine that.
Correct. I just know that everyone's got the same hesitations and hazards that they're concerned about for their career and their safety and their family. And look, I don't know a lot of cops that have been sued civilly. I've got probably 2 other mates that I know have been sued civilly. But then I speak to guys overseas, and it's a common occurrence. There is nothing more concerning than going to work and doing your job than having your family home potentially at risk of a crook being able to sue you, and then you lose everything because the department doesn't want to back you in.
It's just wild, mate.
Could you imagine going to Woolworths as a checkout chick and failing to stack someone's groceries properly and them suing you and taking your house off you? Or going to work as an admin or marketing person and like getting the copywriting wrong, and so because the copywriting's wrong, the court of summary jurisdiction decides to prosecute you, and then civilly you become liable. Unheard of.
It's just wild, mate. And we wonder why we've got the problems that we have, and where police want to go, why would I do it? Why would you risk your life for what? When you're not going to get backed? Like, I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous, mate.
Yeah, the attitude definitely has to change, because the reality is, the people are the police, and without the police, the people have no law and order.
Absolutely.
And I think until that starts to shift and the focus starts to shift back towards supporting our frontline responders, then it's just going to continue to deteriorate.
We'll deep dive a little bit later into that. I want to get into how woke police has gone, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But, mate, do you remember, with some of your arrests, do you remember some funny arrests that you can remember out at Tennant Creek?
Oh, jeez. I've got 2 good ones for you, Adam, if you got time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one starts with my big ears. And
they're not that big, mate.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, I got a big set of wingnuts over here. And there was one young fellow who I actually played footy with, Hamish. And same team, mind you, Sporties, Spitfires. And so Hamish and I would train on Tuesday, Thursday. He'd get blind on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'd end up, without doubt, finding him and locking him up. And it just became a bit of an ongoing joke. Not that I was looking for him, but he just happened to be... He was a shit mag and I was a shit mag, and we always seemed to bump into each other. And so anyway, there's this one day I'm driving along Staunton Street and I'm getting up to Perkins Reserve, which is where the gym is and the sport field. And there's Hamish with another mate stomping on what is likely another mate who's on the ground. So they're literally kicking the shit out of this fella. I'm GDs. I've been training for TRG for a while now, so I'm pretty fit. I'm fully kitted up, which is not the load-bearing vest, just the old school, 10-kilo gun belt. And we pull up, Mach 1, blue and reds, jump out, and it's like an episode of Cops. These guys just fucking sprint. And I'm like, right, we're on here. So I chase down Hamish, and as we're running around the back of Perkins Reserve, I smell this god-awful fucking smell. I'm like, oh, he shit himself. And I'm chasing him. I'm like, I can't not arrest him because he's just been stomping on this bloke. So I'm running along and there's shit running down his leg. And I have to chase him, and I like give him a push in the back, and he falls over on the red dirt gravel, and he starts sliding along, and I jump on him, and I'm like, in the 3-point hold down, knee up on his shoulder, and I've got shit from arsehole to elbow, spread up my uniform because this prick shit himself when he's running away from me. Anyway, he starts giving me a heap of lip, and he's like, hey, big ears, because he'd call me big ears because of, like Noddy and big ears. And so anyway, he got nicknamed with Noddy after that. But that was the first one. But then another absolute banger is, now I can't remember if I was working with Stu or with Dan, but So I'm back in that DV unit, right?
Yep.
I'm plain clothes. This is pre-training for TRG, and I'm definitely training at the local RSL. I'm banging down a schnitzel every night. I've got, like a massive tab.
You got a good bod, mate.
Yeah, I've got the dad bod rocking it, like 21 years of age. I'm about $120 with a gut outside of fucking 45 inches. And I'm sitting in the muster room one day and this phone call comes over the radio. Oh, we've got an absconder from the ICU. Turns out it's a guy that I'd most recently gone down to Ali Karung and helped apprehend under the Mental Health Act. He'd been sectioned. They'd intubated him at the ICU. He was a petrol sniffer, so they're trying to help him out. He absconds from the ICU. We get a phone call from a grey nomad heading north on the Stewart Highway at Alice Springs to Tennant Creek. There's a young man walking down the middle of the Stewart Highway, sniffing petrol out of a can cut in half. No shirt on, just jeans. I'm like, fuck, it's got to be him. So me and Stu or Dan, I can't remember exactly. I think it's Stu. So we get in the XR6 Turbo. I'm in the plain clothes look, right? Like I'm not tooled up or anything. I'm just a fake detective. And Stu's in general duties. I'm driving. We're in this XR6 Turbo. We go about 30 Ks out of town and we find old mate walking down the middle of the road. And I pull up. It's a fully marked police car.
Yep.
I pull up next to him, just cruising in idle. And I look over him. I'm like, fuck, that's good fuel efficiency. He's on less than 300 mils. He's got 30 Ks. This guy's great fuel efficiency. Anyway, so I put the window down. Hey, mate, what are you doing? And he's stoned off his head, right? Like real slow, looks over at me. And it's at this point that a couple of things begin to run through my mind. With a petrol sniffer, they can breathe up, and because of the fumes and the way that the chemicals interact with the body, they can just drop dead. So you're not allowed to give chase to someone who's sniffing petrol. You can't get in a foot chase with them. However, if you're a police officer and you speak to someone and they form the intent that they're in custody, or later on the court of public opinion forms that a belief, he's now going to be a death in custody. So I've got these two things running through my mind. Old mate is standing beside me on the Stewart Highway, traffic at 130 Ks an hour, 110, whatever. And he's recognised that I'm a police officer. I've identified it myself as a police officer. There's me and my partner and this XR6. So we can't do any, there's no special tactics or pincer movements or anything. It's stop, try and get this guy. So he recognises me. He's stoned as fuck, but still he's skinny and young.
Yeah.
Turns and sprints, and I'm like, oh, fuck.
Your worst nightmare.
My worst nightmare, I tell they're going to be a death in custody, or he's going to run into the bush, and it's a search for a death in custody. So I quick as you like, crack the door, don't change it into park, don't do anything, just jump out and fucking give chase at a $120, $130. I'm a big lad right now, and not big in the way of I've been jack and iron. I'm just fat, and I'm like sprinting after him down the highway, making all the bear and animal grunt noises, and thank the Lord, someone intervened. It was, God or whatever. And so this guy, he goes for the edge of the Stewart Highway, and it's a pretty big drift, drop off, pretty steep edge, and he just eats shit. So he just goes AOT and falls down. I'm like, oh, thank fuck. So I just launch myself after him to try and grab him, and I get him in some sort of headlock. This is way before jiu-jitsu. I get him in some sort of bastardized headlock, and I'm just trying to hold him down. I'm like, fuck, where are you, Stu? Where are you? I'm wrestling for my life with this guy. I've got no breath left. He's fit as probably some footy player that just loves a bit of petrol on the side. Anyway, we get in this big wrestle, and I'm fucking rolling around in the dirt, and I'm looking all busted up and clobbing and shit. Meanwhile, there's grey nomads cruising past. Little do I know that the Benny Hill show is in full effect. And as I jumped out of that XR6, it still continued on in drive down the Stewart Highway headed southbound. So Stu's jumped out with me to try and give me a hand catch an old mate that's done that Harry Holt. And instead of being able to come and support me, he's had to turn around and hightail it down the highway. So he's also a fat cop like I am. And he's running after this XR6 that's probably doing, no more than 20 Ks an hour. But because we're all loaded and shit and out of shape, he ends up finally catching this XR6, stops it, gets in. I would have loved to have seen it if I was the grey nomad driving past.
Oh, mate.
So anyway, we get him back to the hospital. He doesn't die, thank God. No coronial.
Yeah.
But we did probably put on one of the most hilarious shows in the NT police history. So,
mate, that is gone.
Well, we saved a life.
Mate, you did.
We saved a life.
But thing to players out there, make sure you put it in park before you jump out of the car and go and arrest someone.
Or don't, and be a mad dog like me.
and chase the car down the down the road.
Absolute shit magnet. Heat seeker Hosco is what they used to call me.
So
heat seeker Hosco.
You do a couple of years in the at Tennant Creek,
Yeah.
and then you went into the was it the proactive side for a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, mate. Yeah, so Tennant Creek was a pretty wonderful place for me, like from the policing experience, but also personally, it's where I met my lovely wife, Melinda. So we met. She was working at the Royal Flying Doctors, and we formed the idea that after Tennant Creek, or I formed the idea that I wanted to go to Alice Springs. Melinda formed the idea that we were going to go to Darwin because she was probably pretty keen on going down the next part of life, which is, marriage and kids. And the Northern Territory, there really isn't that many options in the way of good health care facilities, Darwin being with the best one. So the benefit of going to Tennant Creek is they give you it's like a passion posting afterwards. You can choose anywhere in the Northern Territory, and if they've got a spot, they'll send you there. And if it's Darwin, they'll just send you there. So I get sent to Darwin. I go to Casuarina Police Station. John Ganane, who was from Tennant Creek at the time, former Victorian Police, senior sergeant there, puts me to work straight away. He knows that I'm pretty keen for going the knuckle and doing anything that's needed. I'm on general duties there for a couple of months, and then an opportunity comes up to get involved in a plainclothes task force called Operation Vanadium. And spend the next couple of months working in a crime tactical team of about 6 guys, doing plainclothes operation and targeting opiate-based drug abuse with drug houses, warrants. Awesome, brilliant operation run by actually another former Victorian detective who'd transitioned up to the Northern Territory. 2 of them, Jack Harrington and Dominic Cree, incredible detectives. Learnt a tremendous amount from these guys, from thumbprinting vehicles when you pull them up in a traffic stop, so that there's a recognisable DNA tracer on there, or imprint from you, biological imprint, through to just carrying a plain t-shirt, so you can do like a sit-off if you're in a plain clothes car, as opposed to sitting in a uniform or whatever you might have. Just all these great little tips that being a bush cop in the Territory, where you're chasing down locals that are drunk, intox, whatever, totally different crime to property crime, organised crime from Victoria or sort of suburban life. So really cut my teeth again with those guys. Ended up getting a recognition in the local NT Parliament for the operation, for the success that it was. Hats off to John Ganane and Jack and Dom for what they did. I was just a part of the machine there, but those guys sort of orchestrated it, and that was fantastic. But it got me really focused on trying to get into TRG then when I got up to Darwin.
So you mentioned you had the Benny Hill, your body was looking, and after that you decide, you always said you wanted to go TRG.
Yeah.
And, mate, I've had a guy on from WA, so TRG. Then there's SOGs, there's CERT.
Sons of God, CERT.
Yeah,
Calendar Boys, CERT.
Yeah.
Anyone from CERT that's listening, most beautiful men in the world. Effective, I'm sure they are, but definitely the most beautiful. Northern Territory, beautiful? No beautiful men in the Territory, but very effective.
So, mate, talk me through this. So you apply, and talk me through the process, because, I know basically in police, that's the premium.
It's a tip of the spear for policing, right? There's no one else coming when TRG get called out, or CERT, or TOU, or pick any one of those Tier 1 tactical units from a police tactical group background. And I'm certainly not saying Tier 1 in the sense of SASR or 2 Commando. It's literally it's like there's a PTG, but then there's also usually like a public order response team. So when you talk about tiers with policing, it's usually your tactical team, your PTG is your Tier 1, and then your public order response team is usually your Tier 2. And they've got different tasking and responsibilities, and there's no difference in the fact that both groups are incredibly capable. It's just their taskings and responsibilities are different, and therefore their barriers are different as well. So you got a different person that wants to go into these units. Yeah, so going to training pretty hard for TRG. The assessment when I went in 2009 for that assessment was a 3-dayer. So, and that was just a barrier entry for your physical fitness. It wasn't anything in regards to testing your firearm skills, handling capabilities, that sort of stuff. It was just a 3-day slog fest without sleep, in the heat, on the go, starting with a crazy CrossFit, hero workout, followed by a stores load and carry, followed by going out bush and doing a NavX, and then a stomp, and then a siege, and then a surveillance job, and you just on the go the whole time. Incredibly manpower heavy resource requirement to get that assessment across the line. Get through that, and then you basically got to wait for a spot to open up. So I ended up finishing that assessment in 2009 and getting a pretty shit review from it. Again, sort of going back to the college of just not in the right headspace, going through and sort of just barely passing muster on some of those things. Took that to heart, realised I was probably never going to get into TRG, just based on that feedback that I got from the guys, which was pretty shattering, earth-shattering. But just kept training my ass off and trying to get better and do all the right things. Went and did my firearms instructor's course and ducks that, so got a... not ducks, but 99% on the final X, which was, a feeling that I was appreciative of. And then, sort of just waited around in the doldrums for a bit, just doing general duties. And then an interesting opportunity came up to go into covert surveillance. And so it was the establishment of the inaugural surveillance unit for the NT Police, and was orchestrated by a select few very, very motivated non-commissioned officers to make it happen. They utilised the support of the New South Wales SSB, and we had those guys come up and run our training. And that probably altered my flexibility and dynamic capabilities as a copper, because your requirement to be able to shift focus on the go when you're doing surveillance is unlike anything else. And you've got to have some mental alacrity and flexibility to be able to be successful in that space. So we kicked that off, and I did a year in there before taking a study break from NT Police and going and doing a whole bunch of qualifications. Came back and pretty much went directly into TRG at the end of 2012.
So with that selection, do they do that to obviously weed out the ones that aren't going to make it, or it's an effective selection course that they run?
That 3-day was incredibly effective because it would usually get rid of the ones that didn't want it. Not because it was like a test of how great you were, but because it was so much work in such a condensed period of time that most people just don't have the gumption to keep going. And a lot of guys will fault out or fail out on injury or fail out on heat sickness, or there's a lot of contributing factors as to why people don't get through that assessment. I'm sure it's the same for PICS, certs, TRU, SOG, whatever. Everyone's got their own.
Military,
Yeah. I'm sure there's different factors, but what it's designed to test is just people's their bandwidth to deal with work, real hard, constant work, because TRG is not just a PTG. At the time they had search and rescue, bomb response, dives, close personal protection or Dig Pro, PTG element from the ANZ CDC requirements, and they had some elements of supporting PTU, which is like the technical surveillance unit. So it was all about testing people's ability to just keep going. The ones that thrived, there were definitely guys on my assessment that thrived. Carl and Cam, weapons, still to this day some of my favourite people to work with because they're just such intense characters. And that's, I guess, I made the point that it's a tip of the spear. With TRG, you're talking about Northern Territory, which is about 10, 20 years behind most of the society, and you're dealing with some pretty fucking violent human beings. And so if they've got to turn up, you've got to have blokes that aren't going to back down when push comes to shove, because there ain't no one else. Like I talk about going to a riot and there's 3 cops there. There's no other units that can come in and support TRG. There's no other groups of police that are going to come in and back these guys up. It's like if they get called out, that's it.
Well, it's like your tag east and tag west. The same thing for counter-terrorism. They're the last line. There's no one else coming.
They are, yeah.
No fail mission.
That's right. It's either succeed or die, right?
That's right, exactly.
That's what they've got. And the framework for any police tactical group in Australia is under the same requirements to support Tag East, Tag West with the ANZ, CDC, Australian New Zealand Counter-Terrorism Committee's response to terrorist situations. And, Tiger.
Just got his name back.
Got his name back. That's one of those incidents where if it's declared a terrorist incident by the police, Tag East and West are meant to come in, and the PTG is meant to be the inner cordon until that aid to the civil power is recognised by the government. So it's a pretty intense responsibility when you get into these spaces. I loved it. Like I said to you about going to Tennant Creek, I'm out there looking for challenges. I'm out there looking for how can I test my limits? How can I push myself to the next degree? And that's what it was all about for me.
And for you, so, mate, you're very humble in the sense that you said, I passed, but you passed, and then because it's not people don't realise these units they're not massive, are they? There's 30 guys.
Yeah, TRG we had 30 positions we might have 20 to 25 active guys. We might have a couple of vacancies you're holding, dudes on leave. I think your siege management strategy is 16 or 19. You've got a minimum operators to be able to run a full street siege management strategy approach. Those days are sort of disappearing a bit. It's going much more to mobile hostile offenders that you're dealing with, but that's still what's in the doctrine there. So your numbers aren't great, and with a PTG like the Northern Territories, if you're on a Dig Pro mission, you've got a minimum of 4 dudes for a Dig Pro task. If you've got a search going, you've got a minimum 2 guys on that, not including anyone that's out on the ground doing the search. If you've got a SARMAC and an ASAR, they've got to be out doing that. If you've got a bomb response, God knows, I don't know what those guys do. They sit in the air conditioning and do fuck all as far as I'm concerned. So there's probably about 50 dudes in there doing fuck all. And then, like
you
this.
love them like brothers.
I remember my first training with bomb response. I was out with Kakarot, and we go to this venue. He's like, right, so what we're going to do is kick all the bins. I was like, are you fucking serious? Obviously, he's not. Don't kick. Bomb Tex, I don't think he was serious. You don't kick the bins. It's not advice. But anyway, yeah, there's a bit. I think bombies and operators, or snipers and operators, like door kickers. There's a bit of a love-hate relationship there. Same to what you've got with the fireys and the pole dancers. The pole dancers and the cops.
Hey mate, come on, fireys. I'm a fire, and mate, we're not all we're not all calendar men. Come on.
No, you got anyway, yeah. So it's a great place to work, mate. I loved being in TRG. I say to the guys now, even if they're there, I'm like, don't ever leave. Once you're in that PTG space, don't ever leave. Nothing you go and do will ever be as good as what you're doing there. And that's coming from someone that's gone from being in a PTG to being in executive levels of advisory work with Australian federal government, to state like government leadership, to political, to running businesses, to travelling around the world doing executive protection. My favourite thing I ever did is still being in a PTG in the Northern Territory. And I reckon any bloke that's doing it, or Sheila that's doing it in any other state or territory, if you're not feeling the same way, it's probably because you're bitter and jaded and you've been there too long. It's still the best job in the world.
100%. And talk me through it, mate, because you're an assaulter. So, and do you have your different teams? Have you got Alpha, Bravo?
Yeah. So I was on Delta team for the end of my time in TRG. There's a bunch of Sierras go down there or go down that path. The guys that love the long guns and sitting in the bush because they, that's their jam, right? Like I love to take the piss out of them because they're too scared to go through a door. But the reality is that's their jam. Like everyone sort of plays to their strengths, and I am genuinely taking the piss. Some snipers actually have got a backbone and do like to go in and go through a door. But for me, I was probably, I'm not that into long guns. I was never really interested in the sniper pathway. It seems like a lot of work to go and crawl through the bush that I grew up in. I'd much rather sit in the air-conditioned Bearcat and then just go and kick in the door and be done with the job, go back and, high fives and chocolate bars.
Beers and...
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, look, so there's different teams, right? So TRG, we had a number of different teams, and I'm sure it's changed again, but I was in Delta team, then we would have sort of 5 to 6 people per team, depending on the time of the week and the roster or what courses are going, usually led by a sergeant and then having a 2IC, a senior connie or whatever it is. Everyone's got a different responsibility. You're either a breacher, an assaulter, you're a sniper. It's all under the same sort of doctrine as what you'd see on any of those tactical teams from, Tag East, Tag West, but it's just to a lesser degree because we're not going in with frags, we're going in with flashbangs.
So did you have much interaction with Tag East and Tag West, and the other tactical?
The boys did. I never personally did. I was always out doing something at some other time, whether it was out on deployment or whether we just didn't have the exposure for the periods I was back in Darwin. We had CERT come up. We had different units come up from different times. I got to go and do a bit of a shoot with the boys from Queensland. It's so far removed from anywhere, right? Northern Territory. And the reality is, unless you've got a special event going on up there, like APEC, when APEC was held up there, you're very rarely going to be interacting. The times that I did go and deal with other PTGs or Dig Pro teams was when we got shifted across under the civil power support structure for the ANZ CDC, where we'd go across to Queensland for like G20, and I was on a Dig Pro team for one of the heads of government that come across. Other than that, it's a pretty lonely existence insofar as your exposure. You don't see the guys from Perth unless you're going over there for your skills enhancement course, or the same for Sydney when you're going down to Sydney. I went and did my Dig Pro skills enhancement course in Victoria, and that was at the Victorian Police Officers College, and that in South Yarra. Epic. Brilliant, right? Like we had a combination of dig pro instructors from around Australia get together and put us through our paces after G20. We got the benefit. I got the benefit of learning how to run a major dig pro operation from Big Bad Barry from Q-Pole, who'd been instrumental in running G20, one of the largest and most successful dig pro operations in Australian history. So, I go back to my desire to get shortcuts and secret tips from people's successes. Ha! What a win.
And for you, mate, like I know there's rivalry in the military of different units, and does that exist, or is there a across the board respect of the different, like the SOGs, the CERT, the TRU, the TRG, the all, like is there, like when you see them on around the traps?
I think when you're in, there's competition because it's all about who's the best. When you're out and you've been in that environment, you can quickly see it in other guys that have been in that environment as well. And really all it becomes is a brotherhood where you're just like, oh yeah, you've had to go through a door. I've had to go through a door. You're probably a mad cunt. I might have been a mad cunt once upon a time. Let's be mates. Let's have a beer. Yep. Like I caught up with a guy from Canadian. He was in Calgary. He was in a PTG in Calgary. We're telling stories. We're telling the exact same shit war stories and laughing about them the same as I would on a Friday afternoon character assassination barbecue with the TRG. Yep. Where you're slaying all your mates because of all the shit things they've done. Like it's that fraternity is the word came to me at a recent conference. You join a fraternity when you go and serve like that. When you've gone and put yourself in the shittest, most difficult spot you can with an assessment or a pipeline or a skills test, and you've come out the other side, you join a special fraternity, and it's pretty awesome. When you're in, there's competition, and I like to take the piss out of CERT probably because it's the closest thing to TRG insofar as proximity. Do I reckon that any one is better than the other? Yeah, absolutely. TRG are the best.
I love that.
No. You got to have pride of where you come from. Yeah. And if any operator said to me that they thought another team was better than them, I'd tell them they're a wanker. Yeah. If you don't think your team's the best team, then you're fucking. What are you doing?
So, mate, you get there in 2012 after that long stint, and as you said, you probably didn't think it was going to happen. Mate, when you get there, is it a very much shut up? You're at the bottom of the totem pole, and you do your you're kicking the can, or you're taking the rubbish. Like you're the bottom, you're scum pretty much.
You are the new boy.
Yeah, right.
And if there isn't a knife hand pointed at you at least 16 hours out of every 8-hour shift, you are doing new boy wrong. I remember being taken into the muster in the briefing room by Kingy. He just sat us down, me and the other new boys that had just started. I think there was 6 of us when we started in my squad with TRG. And he sat us down and he goes, listen, I'm paraphrasing. For the next 2 years, your opinion means fuck all. Don't open your mouth. Empty the bins. Do your training. Do your courses. Do better than everyone else is ever going to expect you to do. You still mean nothing to us until you've been here for 2 years. Don't fucking get too big for your britches or you'll get put back in a place. And, man, it's the territory. Like, we would play a game at PT called Murder Ball, which is where we would have one boxing glove on and the other was to bounce the ball. And you'd basically run from end to end of the court punching fuck out of your mates. And it's like it's the best score-settling evener you can have because, it's a competitive game, but you also get to, just take your mates out. So if someone's being a fucking prick, you'd flog them. And you would likely get flogged as well. And then we'd have boxing sessions and we'd do jiu-jitsu and we'd do paintball or not paintball, simunition. And if you were being a dickhead, you'd be set up as the role player and you'd just get brassed up for 8 hours by your mates until you pulled your fucking head in. So, you join TRG. I don't know what it's like anymore, but you're a new boy. Shut up and earn your keep and empty the bins, sweep the floors, wash the cars, clean the motorbikes, service the engines, make sure all the kit's ready to go, get everyone's breaching gear sorted, have your shit squared away, learn the ropes. Which you have to... It builds in you an understanding of the 1%ers.
Not the 1% shit
No, not the 1%
that,
OMCGs, not those, but the jobs, the 1% of jobs. Close the zips on your gear. have your mags fully topped up. Make sure everyone's stunnies are facing the right way. Make sure that, the breaching gear is clean and good to go. It's not rusted and ineffective. You're going to have a fault on an MOE. Make sure the blades are sharp on the saws. Make sure the tyres are pumped on the SPV, that the fuel's over 3/4, that you've picked up all the brass, that you've made sure the armory's looking good, that you've done the resupply if you have to, that you've cleaned your firearms, that you've, do the 1%ers. Make sure you've changed your canister and your gassy if you have to. Don't just, work with shit kit. Clean yourself up. Take it to the Q store. Get it sorted. Report back. You brief up. Think of ideas. Be creative. Be an asset, not a liability.
And for you, you joined in 06 and you're now 2012. You've got to... You've
done some time on the road. I've done my apprenticeship.
And I want to ask you this because it's something that I want to sort of come back to, but then get into now your career of being in TRG. Had your perspective changed and had it changed very quickly and you saw only shit, like the world as being shit now, as being a police officer?
Yeah, I can remember specifically being in surveillance, going back to the station one night after we'd done a bust on a 1%er actually. And sitting in the muster room doing the briefing note up, we're working as a team to finish the log, get the log out to the demons that are going to use it for prosecution. And the news is on, police station, we're watching the news. And the story of this guy with 3 daughters and a wife over on the sunny coast, actually, on the sunny coast.
Where we are now.
Yeah, where the wife and the kids had been burnt to death. I believe the wife and the kids had been burnt to death in a house fire, and he'd only just survived. And I remember raising my voice, as I so habitually always do, just for note. Being the new boy was very hard for me. I got my ass kicked a lot. I love a bit of a yarn. So I raised my voice at the news. I was like, oh, that's fucking terrible, like family man, daughters are dead, wife's dead, blah, blah, blah. And the senior guys in the team, 7+ years, all just looked at me and said, he did it. He's guilty, he did it. I was like, fuck off, how can you think that? And they're like, they explained it to me, and it was something akin to, and I'm sure this isn't a peer-reviewed study, but it's, it's like the full moon effect, right? People say that crime doesn't increase on a full moon. Bullshit. If you've been a cop, crime increases on a full moon. I don't care.
No, I believe that.
Yeah. I think Andrew Huberman spoke about
crazy.
this. I'm like, fuck off. It absolutely happens. You can tell me until you're black and blue in the face with all the science you want, I won't believe you. But so their peer-reviewed study was basically, after 7 years, your brain as a copper changes. And it changes from being people are partially innocent or potentially innocent to everyone is guilty, everyone is a piece of shit until proven otherwise. And I can distinctly remember that conversation, thinking to myself, I probably need to be out of the police before I think my children are guilty. But it did leave a mark on me because I started to see after that I generally think and thought and still think to this day, most people are pieces of shit until they prove otherwise. They're either out to get something, they're narcissistic, they're entertaining their own agenda, or they're looking for benefit for themselves at the cost of other people. And it wasn't until that conversation that I sort of realised and formed that opinion and have probably been stuck to a varying degree in that mindset ever since.
And it's a hard mindset to break because...
Very hard.
And, mate, and look, you've only got to look at... And you, as I say, mate, you've been at the coalface, you dealt with it for 11 years.
Yeah.
But you've only got to look at the way we are in society today. And, mate, you're 100% correct. You are 100%, mate...
It's very self-serving.
We've got youth crime. We've got everything. We've got wars going on. Mate, it's all. You've just said is
good.
true. It's not good.
And I'm recycling wisdom. None of this isn't my own. I'm not some sort of savant. This is all stuff that I've learned from other people. But the average police officer deals with something like 400 times the number of critical incidents that any other human being outside of service will ever deal with. Not including Defence Force personnel that go to war or, civilizations that are under siege, i.e. Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, all that sort of stuff. But for those that are in a peaceful society, it's something like 400 times more critical incidents than any other person in your network. The impact is so overwhelming on who you are that it's unbelievable how it changes your psyche. The thing to consider, and this is the recycled wisdom, is that as a police officer, you will deal with 1 to 5% of the population 95% of the time. You're not dealing with 100% of the population. And the biggest message or thing that I try and impart to cops that are leaving the blue line is just understand that society, by and large, has good in it. Individuals, it's very hard to see past their foibles because as a police officer, you become so attuned to reading people and what they're doing.
And I can tell you now, mate, I always, like, it's when I've met you and I've met other police, I'll say it to the listener, mate, sitting from the other side of a police, or former police, I always got nervous, mate, because I'm like, shit, you're trained to interview people, and now I'm coming and trying to interview you, and I can tell you, man, I've gotten better as I've done more and more of them, but it's hard, mate, like, because you guys, you're looking through that lens of, hang on, well, what's the person, what are they trying, exactly what you said, what are they trying to get, what are they, you know, and
constant risk assessment.
100%. And sitting with police, I know most of you guys, you guarded people. Like and it's like, well, I'll give you, you know, and it is.
As my daughters say, a resting fury face. Dad, you've got a resting fury face. I love that term.
It's good, mate. It's really, and that's the thing, that you're right, that society, and this is the thing, you see it and you saw it for, 11 years, that mate, people are they're in bubbles, and it's only when they're exposed to those, there's a lot of shit in the world. And every police officer I've ever spoken to, mate, says that after dark, that's when you see the real, the badness of society come out into, it happens in daytime as well. I know that, but
it's just way more fun at night.
Yeah, that's right. So mate, let's talk now. First job you went to in the TRG. What do you remember, and what was that like? Finally getting on the tools and proving yourself.
Well, I don't know about proving myself because it was all over before it really began, but it was definitely a funny one. We'd gone through and done our courses, so we'd done our CQB, close quarter battle course, so like, hostage rescue and, sieges and that sort of stuff. Done our patrol course, which is, going our bush and walking through the scrub for hours on end, getting bitten by mozzies, learning some sort of tactical skills. Gone through Dig Pro and then gone through some driving stuff, right? So we're out on the tools and we're new boys, so we're only allowed to be on the cordon. We're not allowed to go in and do the actual siege management stuff. We're basically sitting at the Bearcat or we're sitting on the outer cordon, prepping things for everyone else. I get drawn into the Bearcat just to make numbers up. We've got to have 16, so I'm on the stack for the team, but not set to go in, just with the negotiators. And we get called in for this job. It's a high-risk job, so everyone gets called out. Like, the phone rings, you're on call, come to work. Everyone screams in at $120. No one's pulling you over. You're TRG, right? So we get in there, tool up, get in the Bearcat. Like I said, it rolls in that I'm going to get on the stack. We get to this job, and the details roll out. And this is I talked a little bit about this before with the, situational overwhelm with the amount of stuff going on. And I made mention of it during the riot at Kangaroo Camp. I hear, while I'm on the stack from the negotiators, that we're going to a job to deal with a guy who's just come back from a deployment, sadly a Defence Force guy, just dealing with some shit. And he had a hooker around, and I heard that he wanted to fuck her in a raincoat, and she wouldn't let him. And so he'd pulled a crossbow out, and he was holding her hostage, and we were there to resolve this hostage negotiation. Turns out, it wasn't a rubber ducky, yellow hat, and yellow raincoat. They're talking about a franger. And she was saying that she wanted him to wear a franger. He said no. Turns into a domestic siege. Welcome to Mango Madness. That's how it happens in the Northern Territory. Yeah, welcome. So we're stacked up, and I'm expecting this fucking moron to come out in a yellow, Bert and Ernie rubber ducky hat and a yellow coat. And I'm like, he comes out butt naked, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I'm looking at this dude down the end of my M4, just going, fuck, what has happened? Where are his clothes? Anyway, turns out the negs got him to come out stark naked because they didn't want any weapons on him. Whatever, they convinced him. So we trussed him up and, put him in. And then, I got to go in and do the entry on the house, but it was nothing. We knew there was one man. We'd been going for hours. We knew there was nothing there. So we basically just like a systematic search of contact, just clear the rooms. There's nothing high speed, no white light, no center flash. So that gets the first one done, and that's cutting your teeth. And that was such a relief to be done with the first round of courses, get to go and do a warrant, not fuck it up. I was never expecting to be the best. I would always, in my mind, choose to be the hardest working person that I could be. Not in the room, just that I could be.
Yep.
And always say yes to the work that I got asked to do. Because by default and by proximity of doing repetitions, you get better at anything. And I never aimed to be the best. I just wanted to enjoy the most that I could. So, like if it was going, hey, Ben, can you do a search and rescue in Kalkaringi? Yep, no worries. Hey, Ben, can you do the dig pro job in Ayers Rock? Yep, no worries. Hey, Ben, can you fucking do the halls and walls in the Hilton on the Esplanade? Yep, no worries. I would just say yes to anything I could because I wanted to go and do the reps and get the skills up because that's how you get better at anything.
100%. And, mate, I want to talk for the listener who doesn't know, and we touched on it, like, the Lint Siege a little bit, and can you talk us through, because the difference between a DA and an EA?
Oh, yep.
And go into that if you can for us.
Yeah, sure. So without giving too much away in the sense of code words and stuff, as under a siege management strategy and the framework for the ANZ CDC stuff that we operate as a police tactical group, there's 3 things you need to be aware of, 3 code words you need to be aware of when you go into a job. The first is an IEA, an immediate action order, immediate emergency action order. And that code word will be something that is very, very simplistic, but wouldn't be reused in a conversation. So, you wouldn't hear the words Nakatomi Tower. So maybe your code word for an IEA would be Nakatomi, right? You might hear Nakatomi 3 times, go in. An IEA is rapidly assembled by a team leader or tactical commander, based entirely on the fact that we're all going in, white door 1 on the sound of gunshots or a scream from the hostage. IEA word will be, Bruce Willis. Go, 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 go. Everyone goes in. That's an IEA. There's no planning really behind it, except white door 1, fight to the threat, end the threat, resolve the situation. An EA, which is often a fair bit more planned. We've been in the siege situation for a bit. There's been a time to, scope it out. The Sierras are feeding back intel back to the tactical commander. They're feeding it down the TLs. An EA is areas of responsibility, assignments, troops to task. Your method of or order of march, your method of movement. You're actually getting a full set of briefing orders to go in and take out the threat, whatever that might be. An EA is often white noise, loud, sound and flash. You're going in hot and heavy. A DA is often done with a systematic search to contact or like a much more discrete approach to resolving the task. So it's no noise, silent running. So you're going in covertly. And DAs are probably my preferred way of resolving a situation.
Because I wanted to bring that up just because the listener, with Ben getting, with that, getting his name back and what happened in the Lint, because I know there was a lot of confusion in what happened that day and all that, and it's good to have other,
Yeah, look, I mean, we watched it, right? I was on the tools when that all went down. Like I was in the cave, and I think in my mind the thing that triggers for me is an IEA is when shots are fired and you're going in. And there's the code word's confirmation of the fact that you're going in. That's an IEA. You've got a hostage down, you need to go in and stop the fight, or start the fight, stop it, I suppose. And EA is the tactical commander has taken control of the situation. They've handed over the TL and they've called time to go. The DA is like, it's been going a while and we're going to resolve this on our terms without the offender having any contribution. And EA still, in my mind, leaves a little bit of contribution from the offender because it's forced. It's an emergency action. Whereas the IEA is like, shit has gone down. And when those gunshots went off and those guys were stacked on that door and there was that hesitation and the footage shows it, I felt gutted for them because what it showed to me was a lack of what appears to be clear, delineated leadership.
Yeah, 100%.
Which I think has been proven since.
And you're right. Like you see, someone who you do see that where you hear those shots where Tory was executed.
Yep.
and then there's that pause, and then it's
finally
go.
Yeah.
Like, and I know Ben's spoken about it, and I know that he said it that he was just. They were itching to get in, and
Of course they were. They were just going to do their job.
It's a job. You want to save people.
Yeah.
That's the save the job, do the job,
Save the lives of the hostages.
That's-
Mission.
that's
Save
right.
the lives of the hostages.
That's your job. And I think we've learned a lot from that day, and I'm glad Ben is now able to get his story out and, and share
mate,
it.
yeah.
And like it was, mate. Well done to him and the guys there on that day. And, unfortunate 2 people, lost their lives. But they're heroes, mate. Absolute heroes, taking another piece of shit off this face of this earth.
Spot on.
Yeah, like...
Spot on. Well, you find no disagreement from me. And I feel like anyone that's prepared in a domestic setting to go through a door and put themselves in the line of fire to save the life of somebody else they may likely don't even know is a hero.
100%.
I also think that someone that's prepared to work night shift on Christmas Eve is also a fucking hero.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
I don't think there's it's from my mind, it's gone from being competitive in the sense of like, well, we're TRG and you guys are GDs or any of that sort of bullshit. And it's just like, no, if you're prepared to be of service and sacrifice, you're a hero. You're a straight up hero.
Mate, 100% agree that it's an unforgiving job. It's a job that is...
Fuck, that's just with your peers, mate. Let alone,
let
alone with the public.
Yeah, well, I mean, but also too, mate, with the it can be reward is few and recognition's few and far between.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a job that you won't get a lot of praise, and you know it firsthand, mate.
Yeah,
you won't get a lot of praise, and when you do, you get crucified, and we'll get into that now. We'll talk about.
Well, look, it's funny you say that because from my career, I had a number of occasions where I got recognition from the powers that be. And whether or not that's because I was just having a red hot crack at everything I tried to do. Like I got a letter of recognition for my contributions in starting an emergency services gym in Tennant Creek. I was a bit of an ambitious punk, and we had the commissioner come to town, and I literally hit him up on the piss at the police club and hit him up for $5,000 to donate to this police gym. And we did it. We started a police gym. Like, sure, I got support from different people, and it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people that contributed, but there was recognition. And that's one thing that I remember from my career, that recognition goes a long way to morale, maintaining interest, wanting to do better, improving, having people, rewarding people's creativity by recognising the efforts that they make goes
a long way.
Oh, so good. So, I try and emulate that with Panoptic Solutions, with what we do with even just the administrative creativity that people come up with, whether or not it's a spreadsheet that works better to maximise efficiency for our business. That deserves recognition. I don't know, buy them some flowers or, get a box of chocolates. Just something that just shows people more than just a pat on the back and a, hey, good job. It's like, no, we
actually care.
We care. We care. I have a habit now of really weird. Not weird. I have a habit of when I'm away for a task or whether I'm away for a conference or a course or whatever, I'm only there because of the support that I get from the office, from the business, from the team behind me. I can't do what I do without having those guys behind me. So I buy like a little memento. If I'm, i.e. going to Nashville or something, I'll buy a memento for the team in the office and I'll just put it on their desk. Snow globe, something small, but it's like you're there with me. You're there with me in thought because I couldn't be here without you.
100%. And, mate, I want to talk in another sense of your family and how being at the sharp end, being in TRG, mate, you're away a lot. Yeah. How hard was that for your wife and you being a father as well? And because you're at the tip of the spear. Talk me through that.
Yeah, that's a bit of a deeper one. AB, I reckon for my second daughter, for the first 2 years of her life, I'd probably be home 3 months.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, between tasks where I was deployed or I was working, overtime or I was on a siege or, a course or whatever it was. I reckon I was home for about 3 months. Just flat out. And, people talk about being deployed overseas and you never see your family, but you come back after 9 months, I don't know. It's bizarre having your family grow up in the same house as you and you're away more than you're home. That's a strange feeling. I joke with some of my mates that they married someone from the 1950s. Like they lucked out and they got a wife that, just an absolute weapon, can support, run the household, work full time, raise kids. I've certainly never admitted it, but I am sure that I've lucked out. blessed by God to have the marriage that I've got with Melinda. And it's by no means been easy. It's been a struggle.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later.
There's been some real hard times, but I managed to marry a woman who not only has been able to raise 2 kids while I've been away, pretending to be a war dog and an elite tactical operator, who has also supported me through my political ambitions, who's supported me in running a business, multiple businesses, who's supported me in, moving across the world to live on Christmas Island, to, do anything and everything that I want to pursue. She's been there right behind me, and I think, there's not enough that's said to show support and thanks to those that serve those who serve, or support those who serve. And I think probably where it leads to is, I've never been a person that's ever suffered from any mental health stuff, in the sense of, yeah, sure, I get, anxious if I've got to speak publicly. I get down when my mates commit suicide. I have those bad feelings, all those sorts of things. But I'm not plagued by any dark thoughts. I'm not plagued by depression. Whereas...
You're blessed, mate.
Yeah, I am blessed. Yeah, and I recognise that because I live with someone who has been plagued by depression and still to this day deals with it. And I think, for those of us who serve, we do so much to give back to the community that often we forget to give back to those around us that are closest to us. And they're the ones that really struggle. It's easy for me to go out there and kick in a door because I'm with 30 dudes that are all doing the same thing, highly trained. We know we're going to fucking blitz it. We just know it because we've done. We're brothers in arms. We've been doing run through after run through after run through after run through after run through. We know we're going to fucking blitz it. That's just who we are. What those people around us don't know is all that stuff. So, for all that time of going along and, being who I was for a period of time, she's at home with the kids worried about whether or not I come home. And, there more needs to be recognised in that space for the spouses of those who serve.
100%. I'm actually looking to do a special series next year on that for the... the special forces, and also, but not just special forces. Like, I'm looking at doing police spouses. I'm also looking at doing, our regular infantry units as well.
Ordinary forces.
Yeah, ordinary forces.
That's spot on, mate. And there's stories there that need to be told, because I think the value of storytelling is that it shares insights from other people's lives. I go back to a couple of times. By no means do I think I'm the best at anything. But what I do hope is that by sitting down and talking to you, AB, maybe someone hears a snippet or an insight and they're like, oh, yeah, fuck, maybe I can use that. Or, oh, that's a unique perspective. Perhaps I can take that on. For instance, dealing with shit in life, Stoicism is a fucking great philosophy. I'm an active Stoic. I practice reading meditations from, Marcus Aurelius. I read Seneca. I love it. I constantly absorb that. I write, I read, I journal, I do all those things. I breathe, I do box breathing.
You do ice baths yet?
I do ice baths. Yeah, they're not real common in the territory, but whenever I can ice bath, I'll ice bath. I fucking love a bit of cold water immersion. I think that's fantastic. I love saunas. There's a whole lot more to being healthy than just simply jack and steel, eating broccoli, 100%. Chicken and rice. There's a holistic approach that I think, especially the gung-ho in this environment, the tactical toms, they don't pay attention to. And it's not...
It's no fault of their own.
No.
It's just the environment.
It's just the environment, yeah. Spot on, yeah.
And for you, with that, mate, I know I've spoken to a lot of operators, and for them now, it's a lot of peace and calm. They've been there, they've done that, they've got it out of their system, and now they actually just want to sit. And I got a mate who was phenomenal operator in 2 Commando. Now he just likes to get up every morning, sit on his farm and watch the cows and have a coffee, and that's his life now. He does not want that. He said, if I never pick another gun up again in my life, he said, I'm quite happy with that. He said, and for you, is it similar now? Like in...
Yeah, I wouldn't say the gun thing. I understand where he's coming from. Totally understand where he's coming from. I think what happens is once you've registered, and I spoke about the fight or flight before, once you've registered that you are capable of violence, that you've got some inherent tendency to be good at it as well, that you recognise you've got a certain lethality about you, and you've gone and done things, and you've spent your time sort of in that real metal testing environment, you get to the point where you're like, well, I don't really need to keep doing this. I don't don't see the need behind this. Yeah, I would if I have to, right? Like, I'm absolutely prepared to go to war if I have to go to war, and fucking, start neutral bulleting people and turning them inside out again. If I have to do that, I'll do it. Like, that's life. Do I want to? No, I really love, like when you turned up this morning, the kids are in the pool, they're running amok playing. I would love it if I never saw conflict again in my life.
Yep.
That's my aim, is like just to absolutely live a peaceful life. And if I can avoid violence, then I absolutely will. But that's, I absolutely will. And yet I love doing or going to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu because I'm lawfully allowed to carry out violent acts on people and express that, that darker personality, get those demons out. Like, I fucking love choking people out. Call me a sick cunt. I love getting choked out. I love the fact that I just got tested and I failed and I need to get better. Somewhat like one of the old boys from TRG, Borry, is like, everyone needs to get punched in the face every morning because it keeps them humble. I used to love getting my teeth chipped with him because it was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not actually that great. I did just get knocked the fuck out by this, dude that's 10 years older than me. Respect. Like, that's humility. That's
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think for you as well, mate, what it shows is you're 100% correct in what you just said is, and it's something that you referred to in the first podcast that we sat down and did, is the moment you pulled your taser for the first time to actually have that lethal force and know that you were about to, you're about to shoot someone with a taser, that what registered in your head is, as you said, I'm now drawing a lethal weapon.
Yeah.
And that's right, as you say, every single one of us has violence in us. We can absolutely push to the right. We can snap and do something.
Spot on.
But I like what you say. It's controlled aggression of, yes, I can switch it on if I need to.
Yep.
But I also like that the counterbalance of having that peace and being, as you say, the kids are in the pool, enjoying, and if you never have to do it again, that'd be a great world. But unfortunately,
have to do it again.
Unfortunately, we live in shit world that you might have to, mate.
Spot on. And you make the point that you bring my memory back to it. I told the story about being in the right and tasering old mate. That story you're talking about is where I was involved in a domestic siege, and I'm working with a female partner, and we'd been back and forth to this house over and over again. Islander guy, intoxicated, violent as fuck, a big tradie, like big dude, way bigger than me. Lots of domestic violence in a broken household. So partner had kids from another marriage. We go there the first time, he absconds, runs over the back fence. We heard him running away. We're like, okay, cool, no worries, he's gone. So make safe, tell the missus, don't let him in. We drive off, we attend an attempted suicide. A young Aboriginal guy tries to hang himself in the main street of Tennant Creek. Cut him down, deal with that. We're dealing, we've got the ambos there. We're trying to, resolve that to a peaceful situation. And we get the immediate police assistance required, domestic violence incident. You have to respond to a DV incident. If it's marked or recorded as a DV incident, you have to go. Even though we'd already been there, we knew we had to go again. So this time the shift sergeant, rolls out with us as well because he knows it's getting a bit hectic. So we get down there and it's on. Old mate's inside. It's a siege situation. The kids are in the end of the room. It's a housing commission house. Kitchen's at one end, long hallway, 3 bedrooms off a T-split at the end. Lounge room on the front side, on the white side facing the road. The only entry point that we could find that we were going to be able to make entry to quickly was the green door, or was the door on the green side. So basically where the carport and shed was. So we have to try and figure out a way in, or we have to try and figure out a way to get him out. There's no police negotiators. It's Tennant Creek. So we try and negotiate with him. It's turning to suicide by cop. We're happy to leave it and hold on the cordon. We don't need to go in. Forced entry searches or forced entry apprehensions is a last resort for use of force. So we sit and hold, and then the missus is outside, and she's talking to Beck, my partner, and Beck informs us that the kids are inside and they're locked inside. He starts threatening suicide by cop, but saying, "I'll kill everyone in here." So we're like, okay, well now we've had our hand has been turned. We have to go in. I'm wearing a taser. Rolly's not. We were sort of running one on a patrol at a time at that point when they were first getting rolled out in the territory. So we make a forced entry. We kick in this solid core wooden door. It's the only way we could get in rapidly is through this green door 1. So Rolly and I go in. I've got the taser out, presented front up, so I've got point, and Rolly's over my shoulder, and I can see the Glock over my shoulder. And we have to close the distance because you've only got about 6 foot of effective range. So we close in a little bit, and I get my first... That's all right. So we've got to close the gap. I've got the taser. It's got 6 foot effective range. We get that distance in... The 6 foot might be wrong. I can't remember exactly. But so I get in the distance. I fire the taser, and it's the first time I've sort of, in my mind, fucked up firing a shot in the sense of like effective on task. You know, drop plenty of shots at the range. But what I did was I healed the taser in anticipation of the recoil, same as what you might get with a rookie firearms mistake. This is well before I was a firearms instructor. So I healed the taser, and the top barb misses, and the bottom barb gets him in the guts. And it was at that moment he charges into the only lit up room in the house, which is where we are fearful the kids are. And I'm like, fuck, I've just got these kids killed. So Rolly and I sprint down the hallway, and the same thing happens as the last time I tasered that prick, the other guy's story I was telling, and I try to discharge the cartridge. So he's charged into this only lit up room. I'm fearful that the kids are in there, so is Rolly. So I go to discharge the cartridge from the taser, and I boot myself in the hand again like a fucking moron. So I throw that off, and I get another. I switch off the main. I put another cartridge in, so I get ready to charge it up again. I holster the cartridge. I holster the taser. We get to this doorway, and it's a like a hollow core wooden door, like an internal door. So Rolly and I are trying to kick it in. We're standing against the hallway, booting as hard as we can. He's obviously on the other side, and he's blocked it off, so we can't get it in. Randomly thought, this is that fight or flight thing. This is where I know that I'm prepared to go in a shit situation. I think to myself, right, I've got to be able to get in here. The only way I'm going to get in here is if he's out of the way. The only way to get him out of the way is either make him ineffective or somehow, blow the door off its hinges. I don't have that capability. So I got my baton out, punched a hole through the door with my baton, poked the taser through, and then with the second cartridge, dropped him through the hole in the door. He falls down. We go in, a little bit of the squeaky elbow, lock him up, cuffs on, all good. Kids weren't harmed. Turns out that Beck, massive hero that she is, while we'd been involved in the conflict in the hallway with old mate, she'd managed to draw the kids out through a separate window on the back side of the house, and she'd saved them from potentially being killed. So without her actions, who knows what would have happened in that room? He could have gone to town. We could have gone into a bloodbath. But the point of that story is not the war story. The point of that story is the fact that in the moment where I advanced down the hallway, I went from the mental state of not taking a life to making that mental decision to pull the trigger in what would have otherwise been, if I hadn't been armed with a taser, a lethal use of force. Now, the reason that guy survived, one, was because of the situation and how it unfolded, but two, because I had a taser in the first place. If I hadn't have had a taser, I would have had to have shot him because the only other option was to shoot him. There was no other option without the taser. By having that use of force option, I was able to use a less than lethal use of force. But in my mind, I had committed to the action of the application of lethal force. I had formed the intent that I was going to deprive this guy of his life if I had to, which was the pulling the trigger. And that's a real mind shift perspective. And I actually, for a couple of days afterwards, I struggled with that mind shift until I had a phone call from a good friend of mine at the time, James, and he rang me up and he said, mate, you're not responsible for what you had to do. You're responsible because of the situation as it unfolded. You were there to do the right thing, and you did. You helped those kids. You took a bad guy into custody. But it was a real mental battle for me to deal with the idea of the fact that I had actually intended to deprive someone of their life. That was a real big shift for me as a kid.
And for you...
21. I'm 21 at this
21.
point. Yeah.
I was just about to ask, how, you're 21 at that point. And this is what I mean, and I take nothing away. This is day-to-day policing of...
That was Tuesday.
Yeah, you got to
make...
That
was Tuesday shift.
That's Tuesday shift. You got to make that call. You're 21 years old, and as I say, no offence to office workers, but their greatest fear is probably getting a paper cut. And I mean that because paper cuts hurt. But
well, look, let's... not even to deprive the story of any value in the sense of what I was trying to talk about, but simply... The job I'd come from just before that was an attempted suicide. Yeah. And I'll make reference to the fact that, cops have 400 times more exposures to critical incidents.
Yep.
In that one day alone, I dealt with more critical incidents than most people will deal with in their life, let alone the lethal application of force in an apprehension
Yeah.
where it was a siege situation and there were no other resources. Like some of the use of force requirements in the Northern Territory Police guidelines for the SOPs and general orders are forced entry searches are a last resort. Use of other resources is a must in all circumstances, and neither of those options were available in that remote setting. That's how I cut my teeth. I cut my teeth effectively being the only tool at the end of the day that was there to support people that needed help. And that's how I've sort of developed my career in law enforcement, protection, security, is that there is no one else coming to save you.
Absolutely. It's you. You're the coalface. You're the first on scene.
Which is why I love Stoicism, because it's about you as a person and what you can do for yourself, the actions you can take, the thoughts you can make. You know, it's what can you control? The only thing you can really control is the thoughts that you have. Because at any time you could be deprived of your personal liberty, you could have all your agency and power taken away. But if you can maintain the strength of thoughts and the strength of character that keeps you as true to who you are as you possibly can be, then you're almost invulnerable to a degree.
100%. And that's, as you say, mate, it starts with you. Action is you. You want to be a better version of yourself? Well, you know, and that's why I do the podcast, mate, is that there's someone out there struggling and you, like, they hear your story or they hear, you know, another veteran's story that, you know, they were the guy that was sitting on the lounge or the girl that was sitting on the lounge, and then they took action to, mate, that's the only way.
Don't dwell.
Exactly.
I literally, it's
Don't
all
be
over my social.
mate.
Yeah,
Don't be
it's all over my social media. It's the one thing I keep pushing out is do and don't dwell. Just take action, and life will give back in some form.
100%. And it's what I see in your social media, mate, is it doesn't matter if if you've only got, you know, kettlebells. Do something.
Rock the bells, baby.
Rock the
bells.
Do something, you know, like action. And that's...
Mate, look, the kettlebells are sitting over there by the pool. I brought them up here for Christmas, right? Like,
mate.
just do something.
100%. It doesn't matter. Like last night, mate, I got in the gym and I had a big day driving up to catch up with you, and I was like, no, don't be a sack of shit. Get in the gym and don't be a liability. And did I do a full hour session? No, I didn't. I did 40 minutes, but it's still better.
You did something.
I did
mate.
something. It's better than nothing, and that's what it is. And mate, I want to go. I want to talk about. There's a moment in your career which you highlighted on earlier on 2015, but I want to first read a citation that, and I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this event because this was pretty career defining in what happened in your career and the actions that you did. So you got several accolades, including the prestigious Commissioners Commendation for demonstrating exceptional conduct. This was recognised and was bestowed upon you for your decisive actions in employing lethal force to apprehend an offender who had attempted to murder a fellow police officer in the line of duty. Mate, can you share with us what happened on that day?
Yeah, sure. I was working in TRG. We were doing a general duty support shift, so we had all of our kit. It was me and my team leader at the time, Neil Mellon, Sergeant Mellon. We were stationed in Darwin City. We had just been doing patrols there in the Bongo van, which is like a V-dub version with a cage in the back, suited for 9 blokes, suited for 4 blokes. It was just he and I working at the time. We get a call for backup over the radio, come across, backup in the northern suburbs from the Casuarina police station units. Now, northern suburbs to Darwin City is sort of between 15, 20 minutes. I think on that day I got from Darwin City to Longwood Avenue and Leanya in about 7 minutes. Blue and reds all the way, you know, code 1 driving, absolutely booted it there. That responsibility that we had was effectively to be an augmenting use of force support option to empower and create more agency for general duties operators on the road to be able to do their job. They had an augmenting force of TRG with, you know, tactical experts, and we could support them in whatever they needed. So we got called, we get there real fast. Neil and we formulate a planned response to an unplanned emergency on the way. We start to come up with scenarios and what we're going to do. I'm also at this point a tactical medic, and we're talking about my tactical medic capabilities and what I can do with that. The kit that I've got, the options. As we arrive, it's a 6-foot chain mesh wire fence, so cyclone fencing. On the driveway facing the road are 3 police officers. I knew the 3 of them. One of them is Chris. He's got his K9 ALO, GP, a general purpose dog. And then there's Bondi and, I've forgotten the other fella's name. So they're all standing on the driveway, and they're faced off with 2 blokes that are standing in the driveway. The chain mesh wire fence is 45 degrees open. It's a double hinge gate, and one of them's open 45 degrees. Standing in that gate is male of African descent. He's got his back to the 3 of the cops. I take him to be the brother of who is the offender nominated in this situation that they've asked for backup. And the points of proof to prove the identity of the offender are that one of these gentlemen is asking the other one to calm down and relax. The police are here, that's okay. That's the brother standing in the gate. And the other one is brandishing 2 edged weapons, 30 centimetre kitchen knives, and he's pacing backwards and forwards like a rabid dog, ready to kill people. And so the sergeant, Grievous, comes up to me and Mellon as he's sort of walking to, as we were all sort of coinciding as we walk towards this situation. And he says, "Hey, Hosker, if you can resolve it, sort it out." I'm like, "Yep, no worries, cool." So I approach it. Neil and I already had a discussion about how we do it. Contact and cover officer, me with the taser, him with the firearm, lethal force. I can see all the boys have got their tasers out. No one's got a gun out. And so I walk up. I walk up behind the brother, the peaceful brother. I place my arm around his chest from behind. My left arm reaches around his chest. I draw the firearm from my right, crossbody draw, and I present that as I, in synchronicity, throw the brother out of the way. I present the taser across in front of the chest of the offender, and I crack the first round. So the cartridge goes off, and for all my luck, as I told the story before of, the apprehension in the hallway, one of the barbs doesn't strike true. For whatever reason, I don't know. Like, I'm literally 2 foot from this dude, and I've just cracked him in the chest with this taser. I don't know what happens, but it's a misfire to some degree because old mate can swing his arm, so one of his knives comes around, clears the barbs from his chest, and he's not affected by the taser. It's at this point that he realises, and I'm like eye to eye connected with this dude at a very deep level. I've just tasered him in the chest, and he's just cleared the barbs. It's at this point that I realise I don't have time to recharge the cartridge. I happen to be a subject matter expert in tasering myself in the hand, so at the same time as he realises that, I take the taser and in my right hand throw it to the ground, wrap my fist around my Glock, the 40 cal Glock that I've got strapped to my side. I've just got it like normally holstered. I'm wearing a gun belt on my hips. I'm not having no drop leg thigh holster. I crack it and draw it exactly the way you're meant to be. You're taught as a firearm in firearms. I present the firearm, smack, look up, create a sight picture, and I've got it right on the offender. As I draw the firearm down on him, he realises that it's now a lethal threat, and he turns and runs inside the house. Ironically, it's a pretty similarly shaped house as the last one where we've got the hallway siege going on. Long hallway through the middle, rooms off to the sides of it. It's got a washing area right at the back end of the house. I realise that, so as I see him going to the house, I'm thinking he's going for the back door. I don't want him to escape, and we've got an active armed offender in the public space. So I rush to the back, and the GD's boys go to the front door where he's gone in. As they do, I see a knife fly out, and it squarely strikes the ground just in front of where the boys are. So they back off, and then the door slams shuts and locks. I continue to run up to the back end of the building, and the whole front white side of the building or this residence is like veranda doors, big glass panel doors. There's a couple of them there. I get to the back end of the building where the laundry is, and the door cracks open, and I see his little head pop out, and I've got my firearm. I don't present it at him, but he can see it that it's at chest level in the guard. He identifies me. I see him. He doesn't want to come out to play, so he goes back inside, shuts and locks the door. I move back down to the position where I thought would be the best control point from a tactical command perspective, and begin to start getting ready for what was going to be a siege. As I'm stood there, my firearm's still drawn. I start to turn towards where the boys are. Chris has moved into basically where the knife sort of was laying on the ground-ish, around there on the driveway. There's 2 cars in the carport. He's at the back of the 2 cars. The GD's boys are starting to move around to the black side of the house, or the back end of it, on the far side of the house now, not where I'd just gone up to see old mate. And as I'm about to turn and tell the guys to, hey, let's step back, let's get out of here, ironically, because at the time this is all going through my head, there's a coronial that happens in the Northern Territory called the Conception Coronial. There's a Filipino guy, I believe, who was involved in a police shooting near to where I grew up in Nightcliff. And it was a 6-foot mesh chain wire, cyclone chain mesh fence. And the police had been locked in accidentally because the gate had closed behind them when they'd gone in, spring-loaded gate, and they'd had to shoot this guy. So in my mind, I've got a coronial running through my head where we need to get out of here and create distance for the cordon before we can get TRG called out and effect an appropriate cordon. Don't worry about the backside. Let's just pull out so everyone's safe and no one gets killed. So as I'm thinking this, because it's almost fucking identical situation, active arm offender, making threats to police, instigating their violence. I'm about to say, pull back to the boys. I can see them going down behind the cars to go to the rear of the house. I've got my head turned to the left. The doors are to my right. I hear them crack and it's a loud smash. This guy's just burst through them, right? Glass breaking, doors coming off hinges. I'm like, fuck. So I turn to my right. He's on an elevated 2-foot veranda. I'm at the base on the ground level on the grass, and he's got height on me. I turn. There's a couple of things you're required to do in the police setting. You've got the United Nations requirements. You have to identify yourself as a police officer. You have to call on the offender to surrender. And you have to allow them time to do so. So those three things have to be met. You also have to have the Diamo plus P formula qualified. You have to be in the defensive life. Your actions have to be in the defensive life. The offender has to have the intent to carry out the act of murder or serious harm. They have to have the ability, so they're armed, they're capable. They have to have the means in the sense that there is an environment that they can do it. They have to have the opportunity, so there's nothing between them and they're carrying out their opportunity, their threat. And they've got no preclusive environmental influencing factor. So there's no wall between them and they still want to kill someone. They can actually carry out their intent. So Diamo plus P. You've got to hit the United Nations 3 and then you've got to hit the Diamo plus P.
And well, you got to sum all this up in what, 5-6 seconds or?
The average time that it takes to cover 6 foot with an edged weapon is less than 2 seconds. This guy, when the crime scene guys measured the distance between the door and where the next police officer was located, it was 6.17 something feet. So I've got less than 2 seconds to qualify those three criteria, plus the Diamo plus P. This guy comes out the doors, he's in an elevated position, 2 edged weapons above his head, raised, knives pointed, charging towards Chris and the canine, or me, depending on which way he comes over the fence. So I've literally, I cracked through all these. United Nations 3, Diamo plus P, first round. I pull the trigger. I'm thinking in my head, because I've never shot anyone before, right, I've shot him, he's just going to drop now. You know, anyone that's shot someone will retrospectively look at that and go, you fucking rookie. But yeah, I was. It was the first time I shot anyone. I'll take that on board. So I crack him with the first round. He doesn't go down. I'm like, fuck, I got to shoot again. Like, I've got no other use of force option. He's going to stab and murder Chris if I don't stop him. So he, at that point, launches from the edge of the veranda that's at a height, and I get the next 2 rounds into him. But as I'm shooting him, as he's flying through the air, there's a blue on blue effect about to happen because the boys from GDs are behind where he is now flying through the air. So I have to guide the firearm down off target. He hits the ground and I'm scanning back onto him as the target. I couldn't keep shooting him while he was in the air, otherwise it would have been a potential blue on blue and shot the boys. He hits the deck and he's in all sorts of pain, right? The dog fucking ravages him. He just comes, Arlo's just fucking mauling him. I kicked the knife out of his hand. I still got the gun trained on him. Right, so I cracked the first round off and I'm expecting old mate's going to stop. You know, I've called on him to surrender, identify myself as a police officer. I've given him the chance to do so. There's 5 fifths of fuck all time for that to happen, but I'll make sure it all happens. Crack the first round off. Nothing stops. He keeps going. I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to shoot him again. I've got no other use of force options. He's still got the Diamo plus P unless I intervene. So he gets to the edge of the veranda and he launches himself towards the closest police officer, being Chris and Alo, the canine. I put the next 2 rounds into him as he's flying through the air horizontal. It's not like Time Crisis where you get a feedback, right? When you shoot someone, there's no feedback. There's no like obvious it worked, except he hits the ground and then he's writhing and he's in agony. The GP dog, Alo, she goes to work, starts going the tongue and biting and tooth.
Good on her.
Yeah, good on her. She's doing what she's proven to be good to do. So she starts trying to restrain him as an offender. I walk over, I kick the knife out of his hand, the remaining knife. Turns out I'd shot one of the knives from his hand. Target fixation, you shoot the closest thing in your sight that you're most fixated on. So I'd shot one of the knives out of his hand. The other 2 rounds had gone into the hip and the arse. So with the knife out of his hand, him writhing around on the ground, the dog restraining him, I holstered the firearm and I went in with the cuffs and cuffed him up. At that moment, Neil Mellon, my team leader, came in, dropped my med bag beside me and said, fucking get to work. So I'd gone from, in one instance, cracking rounds off into the, bad guy, trying to, effect immediate incapacitation and restrict the offender from carrying out his intent, to now patching him up. So, plugged the gunshot wounds that I could with gauze. First of all, did the primary survey. So peeled him clean, had in full inspection of front and back sides, trauma assessment, plug the wounds, tourniquet the high horizontal and tight across the left leg, left femur, up in the groin. Israeli bandaged the other gunshot wound, did some minor patching on the hand. It was a small gunshot wound to the hand. And then basically got through the primary survey, did the march, and then did the secondary survey and started getting a set of obs and started carrying out, a record of obs in my notebook. And so from there, the ambos turned up not too long after that. I packaged him up and had him on the ambo bed, and they, took him away in the meat truck. And I later found out that one of the rounds had spiraled up into his chest and was heading towards the lungs, and the surgeons had saved him on the table, and he didn't get killed. So, it was a pretty intense day, to say the least.
Well, for the listeners, mate, that had all happened in what, 10 minutes?
Yeah, inside that 10-minute figure. So it was like 2 minutes on task when we'd arrived, and it was 7-something minutes to get there. So, from doing hot laps of Mitchell Street, sipping on lattes as a wannabe elite tactical operator, to siege situation with rounds cracked off and an offender subdued, and then TCCC applied within 10 minutes. That is policing to a T. You could literally be deleting donuts to dealing with deadly offenders.
And then after you fired, you then got to go through all that rim round, the process. Yeah. And this is where you got with your gun practice, they brought this into question. Can you talk us through that?
So, some of the habits with TRG are probably that you become more familiar with firearms. Your competence leads to some dirty habits creeping in. One of them being...
Not dirty, just...
Oh, yeah, well, you're not perfect practice, right? Which is, you're so familiar, you're moving between different kit setups, covert to field wear to tactical to...
Yep.
You're constantly transitioning firearms, making them safe. One of the things that general duties are required to do is once they bomb up their mags and they action their firearm, they then have to, holster their firearm on their hip or however they mount their rig, and then they discharge the magazine, they top up the 15th round. Well, when you are in TRG, you're constantly going through that transition all the time, so you lose the habit of bombing up your mag for the 15th round. And when the investigators went through, they found that my magazine and my firearm weren't carrying the appropriate amount of rounds, and I just had to explain it, which was corroborated by other tactical operators. It was an accepted practice within the section, so that it didn't become too much of an issue. It was just that I didn't have 15 rounds in my firearm. And I never made a point of trying to hide that. I was open and honest with that from the very get-go, so there was, full integrity there. That night, I did the gun residue testing after the shooting. It was made a crime scene. I was separated from the crime scene. All the procedures were followed appropriately. I had no contact with anyone outside of letting my family know, critical incident, Ben's okay.
Yeah, how was your wife with that?
Oh, you just imagine, totally shaken up. All she gets is a phone call. Ben's been involved in a critical incident. There's been a shooting. We can't tell you anymore. How fucking traumatising is that? It's almost worse knowing than it is to not know. You'd be better off just me coming home saying, hey, Dale, I shot someone, but I'm okay because I'm here. So, I ended up giving a full video recording of the event on that weekend. Did a full statement with the toe cutters and internal affairs. Had an amazing couple of detectives investigate it. I got cleared by Monday afternoon and I was back on duty, active service duty, by Tuesday. And Tuesday afternoon I was deployed on a high-risk apprehension where I had my taser out and was, potentially about to taser someone in another domestic apprehension for a high-risk offender.
It's just wild. It's just...
It is.
It's just
absolutely nuts.
Crazy. And looking back now, it's been a few... 10 years since the incident happened? 10 years? Or nearly 10 years? 9 years. Yeah. Mate, do you look at that now and go, that's just wild, but at the same time, getting back on the tools is probably the best thing for you at that point, mentally?
Yeah, look, I felt completely comfortable with my actions. The moment that I pulled the trigger that third time, that final shot, I knew I'd done the right thing. I never had a moment of doubt in my mind that I had committed the correct course of action. Lethal application of force was the appropriate thing to do at that time to prevent the continuation of the offence, or a greater offence being murder. 100%. And so I was completely comfortable with that, which is why I was happy to talk to EPSC or the toe cutters. I had the association tell me not to, but I just knew. Just something in me knew, right? I was so confident. And so when I look back now, I said to you, like, I've got a bit of a keynote thing about this incident. And it's not about the shooting. It's about the time and attention and doing the work when no one's looking. That's what makes you an expert at something. It's that fear not the man that knows 10,000 kicks, but fear the man who knows one and practices it 10,000 times. Well, that's me pulling the trigger in a tactical environment, training for that situation.
We do it every day.
Yeah, the moment I finished that incident and it was cleared and old mate was taken away, I can specifically remember saying to Melon, that felt like a training event. That felt like a run through at a house. That felt like something we trained for. I felt immensely competent and confident, and that is what true diligence and discipline is meant to bring you, is competence under pressure, because you only ever rise to the highest level of your training. There's no superhero capabilities. You don't fucking turn into Batman on the day when the shit turns, south. You literally are as good as the level of training you've put yourself through. And we were fastidious, which is why I'm happy, arrogantly and jokingly so happy to say, yeah, I think TRG are the best, because I genuinely think we were fucking awesome. Were we better than other people? I don't know. There was no shootout with the OK Corral.
Yeah.
But I genuinely believed in the training we did, the team leaders, the work we do. It's an incredible environment and it's incredibly dynamic, and there's so many exigent circumstances you've got no control over, and you just have to train your ass off.
Well, it's something you said to me in the first podcast, mate, was you guys are on your own, so you guys had to mock up, and build all your stuff and do, so you're right, you're on your own, mate. Like, you're in the territory. It's you on your own.
Spot on. For us to do the 270 or 360, we never got to do 360 because of the spaces and the opportunities we had, but for us to do 270 live fire training for CQB, Kingy, the Mad King, definitely one of my heroes, he welded up steel frames and Hessian frames, and we would load the 3-ton truck up. We would take two teams out at a time, and we'd go out to Kamali Creek. I've still got the Kamali Creek Gun Club shirt, right? Like, we'd go out there and we'd set up panels in the bush, and we'd do live fire run-throughs on a 270 range that we built. Like, the tactical team built, not someone built for us, not the federal government gave us a $10 million counter-terrorism training facility, Queensland. We literally built our own thing. I remember when we got the ability to do pit manoeuvres in the Northern Territory, I spent weeks welding up Falcons and Commodores with push bar braces all around them. Like, I was welding in the police. It wasn't someone was doing it for me. We weren't being provided with the tools. We were being provided with you can do it, figure it out. And so ingenuity, the mother of all invention, we created these basically like tactical training cars, and we're building pit maneuver vehicles, and we're practicing in a vacant lot of a industrial area that we managed to get approval to work in. The insurance and liability associated with that is off the hook. The things that we would do for the department to get them capability ready, off the hook. The things that they would do to fuck us over, off the hook. There is a disparity between what we're prepared to do as people and individuals for the department and what they're prepared to cover you on. Not to say there's not some good things about, policing and departments, all that sort of stuff, but certainly there's a disparity there.
100%. And so you were awarded a commendation for that, and how did that come about? Was it your team leader that put you forward for that?
Mate, Izzy Cummins did that, I believe. She was one of the senior demons that did the investigation, and she put me forward for it. I had no idea it was coming. I just got a letter in the mail one day saying, hey, turn up for this ceremony. I thought it was just my 10-year gong. I thought I was just getting my gong. And it was like, no, here's your bravery gong, whatever it is. I don't even know where it is at the moment. Probably somewhere at home. I barely even wear it. I don't even know the last time I would have worn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Izzy submitted that for me to get recognised, and I am lucky because I've had recognition in the job in an environment that's pretty ruthless and thankless. Letters of recognition from assistant commissioners through to Commissioners Commendation for bravery. It's pretty special, mate. Like, not because it's me, but it's recognition of all the work that you put in along 100%. The time. That's what is special about it.
And I think too, what it shows your kids is a legacy for your kids. Like, it's not. And
I've not thought about that.
Most people like most veterans I talk to always go, "Oh, mate, they're just lolly rappers."
Yeah.
To you, they're just you're doing the job.
Much of it, right?
But it's it's a legacy to leave to your kids, or it's something that you go, you know what, like dad gave of service or mum gave of service, and this represents when Dad was away or Mum was away, and that's a way that I look at medals and that sort of thing.
I'd not thought about that, mate, but it's an interesting point because my grandfather served. He was in World War II, and on my mum's side, and we all thought, because he never spoke about it, that he was just in the ACACs and he was over in PNG and never really saw any action. And we were going, after he passed, I was going through his shed. I was sort of myself and my older cousin Matt were the eldest boys in the family, and I was going through his shed and I found a whole bunch of his stuff, and here's him down at Swan Island, and he's got commandos, like strike swiftly. So I'm like, who is this guy? I don't even know who my grandfather was, but he's got a whole bunch of paraphernalia from commandos. He was down at Swan Island where all the squeaky, sneaky squirrel, 4 squadron stuff happens that no one talks about.
Yep.
And I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, I'm proud of the things that he did without even knowing what he's done, the service that he's given. And I guess the same can be said for what the kids will see from me in the future. I don't know. Hopefully they both serve. Maybe...
Hopefully not coppers.
Maybe not the cops. I don't know. Maybe things change. But I'd certainly... I'd be proud of them if they served, because it'd be something they chose to do. But equally, I encourage people to join the police all the time because the opportunities it's given me. I encourage people... It's a great opportunity, great career. There are some drawbacks and limitations, but, it's service.
And I think, mate, from what I'm here now recording on the beautiful Sunshine Coast with your father-in-law's beautiful home, and mate, your kids are so lovely. They're welcoming. Hi, how you going?
Yeah.
Mate, that's a credit to you and your wife, mate.
Melinda, mate.
Yeah, Melinda.
I've been out working my ass off, not being home, right? So huge kudos to her and the work that she does, and them as people. So
absolutely.
Very blessed.
In that same year, mate, you completed the highest national qualification in the Australian Police curriculum for Dignitary Protection.
Correct.
What was that like, going and doing that course?
Epic. I never expected a gong out of doing what I did, which was going to work on Tuesday or whatever day it was, Friday, got in that shooting. But being positioned by your peers to be an expert in a subject is pretty awesome. And it's not going and doing that course that makes you an expert by any means, but it's the opportunity to further develop yourself towards... I am a massive believer in training and education. Continual. It's not... So many dudes in this industry or from, tier 1 SF or PTGs or whatever get stuck in the fact of who they were. And I can quite easily get wrapped up around the axles about being in TRG for a minute. But the reality is that's not where I am and that's not who I am. That was 9 years ago that I was in TRG. Now it's like, who am I? Well, I'm a business manager in an executive protection firm for, one of the industry leading authorities in Australia and the Asia Pacific region. And that comes from the fact that I got to go and do that course. So I got to specialise. I got to go down that path of dignitary protection whilst being a tactical police officer. I got to do something that very few other police officers get to go and do, and that is to basically develop a skill set in dignitary protection to the highest level that you can under the framework of policing. Not exposure and experience, but just from education.
And for you, how are you travelling mentally at this point? Because obviously you went through a coronial inquest.
Yep.
You were cleared of that. You were cleared any wrongdoings. Did that guy end up going to jail, or what happened to him?
Yeah, look, to be honest, Adam, I heard a couple of different things, but the last I heard was that he was out and about in the Northern Territory, still being a shitbag. At first, I'd heard he'd got a colostomy bag, he'd been deported, a couple of different bits and pieces, but then someone said they bumped into him on a job, and I was like, I don't even know the guy's name. Like, I genuinely don't even know his name. Yeah. I couldn't give a shit. Yeah.
You saved fellow officers.
Yeah, I was just there doing my job. He was a mental defect, so he had a whole bunch of issues. He had cocaine abuse when he was young, like a heap of problems. So he is a classic example of the police having to intervene in what would have otherwise been a health response. And the only way that police can really de-escalate things is with the use of force or apprehension. That's what was required.
Well, mate, it's a valid point you touch on there, is that we've only got to look at the recent Bondi stabbings.
Yep.
Of that was a mental health thing that was a letdown. That,
spot on.
That police intervened again, and unfortunately 6 people were tragically taken because of a mentally ill person. That and why may it not be, listeners who find this next part, turn off and I don't care if you don't listen. why we ever got rid of our mental institutions, mate, of why they shut them down, I will never know, because there are people out there, mate, that are walking amongst us, as you've seen, that indeed can get to that. They can have an episode.
Spot on.
And people, civilians, pay the innocent price.
And there's no one caring for them because they often come from broken homes or places where there's a lack of support. Let me just run us back to that Benny Hill moment with the guy walking down the highway sniffing petrol. The family around him had given up on him. Rightly so. He's a piece of shit. He completely fucked his life. Sure, there's probably trauma and instigating features and all that sort of stuff, but at some point it gets to the stage where he's a danger to society.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with old mate. You know, like unfortunately, he became a danger to society. How quickly did he go off the rails? Who knows? I mean, I'm not there. I'm commenting on those sorts of things, the dynamics, it's really difficult. However, quite often it is that the police have to step in and intervene in that environment. So
absolutely. And so mentally you were travelling okay at this point?
Yeah, look, man, I was firing on all cylinders and still, you know, to this day have been really good about everything that sort of went down in the space of my actions and my own mental health. The one thing that really stands out to me that pisses me off is always going to be that weak phone call from the ivory tower psychologist checking if you're okay. But, you know, I got that. I got the phone call from them. I never saw them ever again after that. I just accept that it's a poor business practice from the department.
So, mate, in 2017, you resigned from the Northern Territory Police. You're at the peak of your tip of the spear.
Yep.
After 11 years of service. Why did you come to this decision, mate?
Well, the shift in paradigms for me was not that I wanted out. I loved TRG. The shift came in a conversation with my wife, and it. Meanwhile, in TRG, I'd also been running a CrossFit affiliate. My wife and I had started an organic health food cafe. I'm working away. I'm involved in local politics. I'm running these businesses. Her mental health had begun to deteriorate, and I hadn't caught it because I was never there. And we're sitting in the lounge room one night, and she says to me, and we've got kids at the time, she says, the world would be better off without me in it. And I'm decidedly a man of action, and I recognise that the support structures she needs aren't in Darwin. And so we caved it in. I sold the gym. We kept the cafe open until we could sell that. I resigned from the police, and I took a position, you know, and serendipity is an incredible thing that I'll never not believe in. Panoptic Solutions are recruiting for an ops manager for an executive protection company in the Gold Coast. And so one conversation happens with Melinda, and then I see this opportunity. I'm like, right, that's me. I'm DigPri qualified to the highest levels. That's my jam. I'm decorated. I don't know what more I can do in TRG, but I do know that I want my children to have a mother. So that's more important. Let's go. And so we cracked on and got into it.
So, and I want to talk about that, mate, because that is... and we spoke about it in part one when we caught up, mate. That's a very because you're putting your and mate, credit to you, like you absolutely and your beautiful wife is here today. For those, she's still here today. But how did your mates take that when you said, "Look, boys, and look, family is always number one."
Yeah.
Were they supportive of it and understood it? Or?
Yeah. Look, the dudes on the teams are super supportive. You can hear the kids in the background there also being supportive. But no, the dudes in the teams are always massively supportive. You know, a lot of guys go through divorces and horrible situations because of the work that we do and the way that we live our lives, because we're always away and we're on the tools. So it's pretty well respected. You know, like a lot of us have come from broken marriage or have got broken marriages. I'm definitely one of the few that I know that has managed to keep their marriage going through thick and thin. And, you know, that instance, that conversation that, prompted us to move to Queensland and me to, resign from the police, that is not the only time we've faced the effects of depression. And it would have only been 10, 11 months after that Melinda actually made an attempt to commit suicide by overdosing on her medication. Mm. So the decision was correct to move. The implication of, health management or mental health management plan wasn't enough. And, coinciding with the pressures of running businesses and me going into an EP firm that's basically doing similar to what I was doing in TRG, but, being on the Gold Coast and not the Sunshine Coast near her family. I'd also happened to read a book by Johan Hari about lost connections and the importance of community and connection to other people for people suffering from depression and the scales that can be affected. And if there's anyone out there that is dealing with depression the way I was, or maybe you're affected by it, Johan Hari's book Lost Connections is absolutely worth reading because it tries to address depression from the perspective of like a holistic environmental approach as opposed to the therapeutic intervention with medicine, which, I'm all for better living through chemistry. A lot of people have got better lives because of chemistry, and that's really important. There's also more at stake than simply just popping a pill and thinking everything's going to be fixed by it. And the emphasis on being closer to the people that love and support you is paramount in my mind in regards to dealing with depression. So, for me, it was a real battle dealing with Melinda's depression because I couldn't and still can't truly grasp and understand it. And for anyone that has a partner like myself, maybe if you're dealing with depression of your own and you've got someone that's, super action oriented and they just want to fix everything and they want to work and they want to do things, but they don't understand it's hard for them. It was really hard for me to understand how the implications of depression affect you because I'm just like, well, just go to the gym, eat right, go to the gym, go and do the things you need to do. Don't think about it. Don't dwell. The more you dwell on it, the more you're fucked. Don't dwell on a thing, and you're going to crack on and live life. And that caused resentment and bitterness and a struggle. And it's probably not until earlier this year that Melinda and I truly got to the point that we could probably understand each other better as a husband and wife. And that's why consistent application of effort over time leads to success.
100%. And mate, I know myself, I've written my book about my own personal struggles and, I was there 10 years ago where I wanted to end my life and I wouldn't wish depression on my worst enemy, mate. It's for people who don't, and you're one of the very few that are blessed not to, I had both. I had depression and anxiety. So I had severe depression and severe anxiety, and there's the chemical imbalance in your head that you're trying to deal with, the biggest thing that I found, mate, was when people said, "Oh, just get over it. You're just attention seeking." It's like, no, there's some chemical imbalance. There's a chemical imbalance going on here, and I can't control my emotion. I can't control my mood. I can't. There's so much going on, and mate. But as you're saying, that finding those tools that can help you be the best version of yourself, like that tongue twister, the holistic approach of ice baths, exercise, eating well, meditation,
family, connection, sport,
exactly,
linking in with things that matter that give you purpose. I couldn't implore people to do that enough. The problem is when you're depressed, and having firsthand seen it with Melinda. Fuck, that's what you want to do when you're depressed. All 100%. You want to do is lay in bed.
100%.
And wait for the day to end so you can be over the day and maybe sleep so you don't feel the way you feel.
100%.
There's no action, there's no impetus, there's no mobility, there's no nothing. It's like, I've seen it. People just want to not exist. Exist but not exist. They don't want to die because they're not that depressed yet, but they get to the point that they become hopeless.
And that's hard for you because, you've been at the sharp end. You've been at such a kinetic pace,
mate. I couldn't even fathom it. I still can't fathom that. I'm so action-oriented. I'll be up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be working on something, writing, reading, developing something, whatever it is.
Going to the gym,
whatever it is. I'm doing something, learning language, whatever. But I'm up doing something, and then I might not stop until 10 p.m. at night, and then I might wake up at 1 and I've got to go again, and then I'm just fucking hyperactive with the requirement to move and be productive. Melinda will often say to me, it's like, if I don't have something to do, I look lost because it's not me to not do something. Whereas personality-wise, she's completely different. She's happy to not be doing anything. She's happy to be at a state of stasis and
just chilling out.
Yeah, because maybe that's the thing that she needs is that time to chill out. I need to be productive. I need to be functioning.
And for you, that you've made that decision, you've now, like as you said, because you jumped straight into that, where you are now, Panoptic Solutions. Did you find transition hard, or was it just bang, crack on, let's keep going? No. And you haven't really, you didn't have that
There's no downtime.
Separation anxiety.
Yeah,
And
no, I think every cop does, because as time moves on, it's only the fond things you remember. And I miss the camaraderie, and I miss the toys and the playing and the, and I'm talking about, shooting guns and riding motos and blowing shit up and, going on the good jobs and all that sort of stuff. I miss all that. And even to this day, if I could turn back time and just be back in TRG, then I would, because it was fucking awesome. I loved it. Don't ever leave. If you're there, lads, don't ever leave. So yeah, there's definitely that separation from the police, and I don't think you ever truly leave the police. Like I am still.
You still bleed blue, mate.
Oh fuck, without a doubt. If there's a copper in trouble, I'm jumping in. If it's a civil environment and I can see the cops getting a hard time, I'm going to back them up. Like that's never going to change. I'm always going to back the boys in blue. But it's what does start to change is your mindset, and you start to see just how badly you were treated in the police. Because, man, I found an organisation that recognises and respects their employees, gives a fuck about them, has the empathy to care and say, hey, if you need time off, you can have time off. Like, I've absolutely hit the jackpot with where I am at the moment.
I know, mate. I've seen your one of your bosses, mate, who's an absolute legend.
Yeah, Tango, like an absolute champion, right? But there's a guy he's served. He did his time in the RAF. He went over to Iraq. He's done the PMC stuff. He's been in the EP industry. He's also served in the paramedical space with Queensland Ambulance. Like, there's a dude that's done it all, from starting as a grunt in the RAF, and then working his way through to now running one of the largest, most successful EP firms in Australia. And it's not an accident. It's because he's a really savvy businessman and a great operator. One of the things that stands out to me, right, these one percenters. He went and did the Ronin SA course. He's military, he's got the military qualifications for Dig Pro and CPP and all that sort of stuff. He's, he was a good trooper and all that sort of. He went and did the Ronin SA course, and he, at the time, was one of 6 people to qualify. I think they've had, I don't know the number, but I think Tim Smith said it was, over 3,500 people have gone through their course. It's 10K to go and do that course. It's a 5-week live-in in South Africa. There's a medical component, there's a PMC, there's an EP component, there's shooting, there's room combat, there's physicality, there's fitness. Tango's one of 6 people when he goes through and does it that passes as a team leader. Like, that's insane. That's the sort of guy this dude is. He holds himself to such a high standard. The first job I did with Panoptic was working with a high-profile, publicly recognisable boxer in Queensland. And we were doing a major event there. And I remember rocking into the ops room and seeing a set of orders briefed better than what TRG were, and a ops room that was more well-defined on the move in a hotel. We were literally, it was a temp ops room. And I was like, holy fuck, this is Ridgy-Dig. Like, this is a private entity that is absolutely on point with a Ridgy-Dig Mickey Mouse, like, legit outfit. And I was so impressed. I was like, I'm comfortable that I've made this decision now. Yeah.
And were you going to do that course yourself, or?
Ronin?
Yeah.
I'd love to go and do Ronin. I just don't have fucking 5 weeks to give up.
Yeah. You're a busy man.
I'd love to go and do Tim Smith's Ronin course. I don't know if I'd pass the chin-ups at the moment. I'm back to that, detective body. But, yeah, look, I'd love to go and do that course. I reckon it'd be great fun. I just, is it right for me now? Probably not. I've probably transitioned more towards the business development side of things for the business.
Yep.
I still am on the tools, but it's more in an X and planning perspective.
100%. And
yeah.
in the same year that you moved, you expanded your training again. And as you said throughout the podcast, after that first critical, like that incident, you wanted to your wealth for knowledge, the medical, the wealth for, instead of sitting around going, well, my dick's in my hand, what do I do? I can't help. And then now you expanded to your experience by training as the TAC Med with the National Critical Care and Trauma Response Centre to a level 3. What was that like?
Yeah, so the NCCTRC, which is the National Critical Care and Trauma Response Centre, they are a federal government funded organisation that can deploy a level 3 or 2, a level something hospital out into the Pacific on short notice. They've also been deployed for like COVID response domestically. They're sort of your tip of your spear medical response for short periods of activity. They pull together from resources all around Australia, sort of under the same sort of framework as what the ANZ CDC does for bringing tactical cops together, but brings professional medicals together. They have to do a bunch of like onboarding and that sort of stuff. But so TRG runs their tactical medical program through NCCTRC, who does the training for their first aid and their tactical medic stuff. And it's second to none. Like, you're getting trained by some of the best medical operators in the world in Australia, how to do TCCC. The only thing that we couldn't do was therapeutic administration. So we had no license and medical director, and we also had no storage, so we couldn't operate with drugs, but we could do everything up to like intraosseous and all sorts of interventions, which doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of the guys out there that know tactical trauma stuff. But from a copper's perspective, where you go from doing 30 and 2 CPR and snakebite bandages to having this increased capability where you can actually address medical issues, that training later on led me to being deployed on a job to Fiji during COVID, where I was a ship's medic, or medic in a marine environment for an ultra high net worth family for 3 months, deployed on a remote tropical island. Now, I wouldn't have had that if I didn't invest my time and attention early days in my careers in something that I would never have guessed would lead me to that, but it took the effort to do so because I had an interest in it.
I think too, what it says there, mate, for any young player out there is, you never know what course that you might do in the police that could lead you out once you leave the job. Yeah. And I had some advice from a millionaire that I know, and he said, Adam, it doesn't matter what job you do in life, do it to the best of your ability, because he said you never know who's going to walk through that door. And he said, if you do the job well, someone will recognise your work ethic, and it could lead you to where you want to go. So any young player out there who's going, what am I doing? Kicking rocks. Just do it.
Do it.
And look at you.
Do the shit jobs.
Look at that job. You got to go to Fiji.
I literally lived on cloud break for 3 months during COVID. Right, everyone's having a shit time lockdown. I was living on a tropical island. People pay ridiculous amounts of money to go and do it because I put myself through the paces, and I chose to do the hard shit job that no one else wanted to do, and it paid off, and it will pay off. I wrote an article just the other day for Troy Knight, Havoc 06. The job that you're interviewing for in 20 years starts today. The chief security officer or chief executive officer, whatever you think you're going to end up doing, that starts today with the things you're doing now, with the courses you're taking, with the education you're putting yourself through, with the connections and the network that you're developing. Your future starts today. You just can't see it or feel it, but give it everything you've got, because the future you is going to thank you for it.
100%. No, that's 100%. That's what it is. It doesn't, mate.
So when you're hosting 60 Minutes, mate,
mate, I don't know about that, but we'll see what happens, mate. I don't have a face for television, so even though I've been on it, so
you've got the face for radio.
That's it, mate.
Gingers that we are.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. And so, mate, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Oof. Well, first of all, no, he wouldn't, because he's a dickhead. And as most 18-year-olds are, they're dickheads. I would go and be of service. Go and join a .gov organisation and be of service. Do the work, because it will pay off in ways you'll never even begin to imagine. And my brother says it all the time. It's a banger of a line. You'll never look back and wish you were more of a cunt to someone. You'll always look back and think, I wish I'd been kinder.
100%.
Not including having to shoot someone. That's a different environment. But for the most part in social interactions, just be kind. And I think
that's lost in today's world, mate.
Oh, mate, the ego and narcissism that's out there, social media, all that shit. Absolutely. Just try and be kinder.
100%.
That would be the advice. So do the best you can and be kind.
And for you, mate, you decided, mate, in this, after you got out of the police, you still wanted to give a service, mate, and you went to go into politics, mate. Where did this come from?
Well, I think as a small business owner, you start to see what happens in government, especially when you've got employees and responsibility to feed people, through the work that they're doing for you, and you got to pay their wages, that sort of stuff. You start to get the shits when you see government run poorly, and I witnessed a few things in the NT that got my back up, and so I reached out to some people that I knew, and I was able to obtain a position in the NT government as an executive officer to the chief minister, to the chief of staff of the chief minister. And I started cutting my teeth in politics there, seeing what policy writing's about, seeing about government administration, the actual higher end of things, the functioning. And from there, that led me towards, there was a pre-selection for the 2016 elections, the general election in the Northern Territory, and I pre-selected for the electorate of Drysdale. I ran that campaign, fully funded it myself. You know, there was funding from within the party, but fully funded my own personal campaign methods. And I, in a landslide election loss for the government of the day, which was the CLP, which is my side, we a conservative government, we lost by like 21% across the board. We got reduced down to 2 seats. That seat, I think I lost by 600 votes. So, you know, in an incredibly massive loss for the party, I still did relatively well, which I was proud of, but I also acknowledged, you know, we certainly made mistakes and we needed to learn from it. 2022, I contested a by-election in the electorate of Fanny Bay, and I won on the primaries by, I think, 400 votes. I won on the primaries, and then lost on preferences from the Greens to the opposition candidate, or the candidate, Brett Potter. And so that for me was that was a kick in the teeth. The first general election, I'd accepted the loss, like, yep, that's fair. 2022, when I contested the by-election, I was a bit dismayed because the Northern Territory at the moment was in a really shit spot in 2022. There was a lot of shit going wrong. The CLP have only... the CLP in the 2024 election, the general election, romped it in. Like, totally annihilated the Labor Party, and they're now taking control of the Northern Territory and they're running it under their agenda. But it was a real kick in the teeth because I thought, well, you know, public opinion is that I've won on the primaries. Secondary preferences have taken this out. The Northern Territory did not need more Labor in charge at the time. They needed a new direction. And so being born and raised there, it left me with quite a bitter taste in my mouth. You know, not only had I given, 11 and a bit years service in the police, you know...
You'd run businesses.
I'd run businesses. I'd employed people. I'd been an upstanding member of the community. I wasn't a shitbag. I gave a hoot about it, and they responded by electing someone who's from outside the Northern Territory, who was basically just a Labor Party... we call them, sycophants or apachiks. So I was like, you know what, fuck it. They don't need me. I don't need to be here. And so I got back into working with Panoptic Solutions and came back in as a business manager with Troy after the 2022 election.
And that, because you gone around and door knocked, didn't you? Like
2016, I door knocked my electorate twice. 2022, I door knocked my electorate once. I managed to get around once fully, and then letterboxed them as well. So, you know, as a cop, door knocking's not hard, right? Because you go to house all the time. As a politician, door knocking's very different because there's no tools on your belt. You're going there contesting what, effectively 50% of the population gives zero fucks about, and then the other 50% of the population don't want to talk about it because they're either for or against you and they're not going to give it up anyway. So from like a business development sales perspective, nothing will get you better at selling a product or service than trying to sell politics to Australians.
Absolutely. And would you look at going in again, mate? Like, would you, or like state? Or, I mean, you're in Queensland now, or state or federal?
I don't know, mate. You never say never. There's one thing I've learnt, and that is that zero-sum language is detrimental to everyone that uses it and abides by it. So I would never say never. I would like the kids to probably be on their way through uni before I got back involved in politics.
Because this is a dirty game.
Yeah, it's a dirty game, and it's also a time sink. You know, like, you every night of the week you're out attending social events because you can't sell a secret. In politics, you can't sell a secret, and you can't get elected if no one knows who you are. So you have to sell yourself to everyone that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the hazards of me being in politics was I love a chinwag, but I'm also happy to have a Barney with someone and tell them to get fucked if I don't think that they're right. And that happened a number of times, maybe to my detriment in that first election, where I got into full-blown arguments on the doorstep. But you know what? If they're not going to vote for me, they're not going to vote for me. So why the fuck would I try and convince them?
It's something that you said, mate, that I stand by now is either have a backbone or don't whinge. Like,
stand for something.
Stand for something.
Stand for something.
And I love that because, and that's, I walked away from our first meeting going, you know what? Ben's right. Like, so many people these days are too scared to say how they feel because it might offend someone or it might upset. Say it. If you don't like a person, I'd rather someone say it to my face than talk behind my back and stab me in the back.
Spot on, mate. We are so afraid of the consequences of someone not liking us in this day and age and social media perceptions. You know what? If you don't stand for something, you may as well not even exist. You've got to have something you believe in, something you back.
100%.
And if you're like, like Andrew Hasty over in Perth, or you've got old mate up in Townsville.
Phil Thompson.
Thompson.
Sorry. Yep.
These are dudes that have given service and they've stood up and they've served. Jackie Lambie, same thing again. Like there's a lady that doesn't give a fuck what she says, and if she offends someone, she just says it. That's the testament of a truly good, I think, representative. Is it someone that actually knows they're going to offend people? They're going to have people that they aren't afraid of people who are going to vote against them
100%.
because they stand for what they believe in, and that matters.
Well, mate, I mean, another great example, Jacinta Price. Same thing, mate.
Love JP, mate. I was a treasurer for the for the federal general election when JP for the Country Liberal Party. I was the treasurer up there doing the fundraising for when JP was elected, and couldn't be more proud of the efforts she put in. And that's a whole nother game. Being on a non-paid committee position in a political party during a general election is wild. The things you see, the things that you're exposed to are just incredible. And the amount of work that JP did in getting elected, second to none. And we couldn't have a better representative with her.
100%, mate. And, she copped absolute criticism for the voice and everything.
Of course, because she's standing up to the left agenda, mate. She's standing up to cancel culture, and she's got every authority which they hate. She's an Indigenous woman, raised in the bush, worked out there, absolutely is the right person to stand up and have a real voice about what matters to Indigenous rights and Indigenous needs. And
so, and that's the thing, as you say, have a backbone, stand.
Yep.
Or, and this is the thing where I've always said, mate, the man in the arena is always, I always go back to that because
I've got that up at my desk. I've got the man in the arena up on my desk. I've got it up at home.
When people say, when you're in the trenches with me, Ben, and you've walked in my shoes, or you're walking beside me in these shoes trying to make a difference.
Yep.
I'll listen to you and let you have an opinion.
Yep.
It's easy to be on the sidelines throwing rocks.
Oh man!
And as you said, tall poppy syndrome. Yeah, tall poppy syndrome, mate. You can tear anyone down. In Australia, unfortunately, mate, we have a. I don't know what it, mate. We're so laid back, and yet we can't seem to. If you're doing better than me, mate, I need to tug on your shirt and go, no, mate, totally. Get down. And it's so wrong.
I think it's that resource competitiveness. It's that there's a. What do they call it? That there's an idea or a mindset that there is only so much of the pie and there's only so many slices. It's not it's a limited mindset versus an abundance mindset.
100%.
And very much competitive driven. And if you're doing better than me, I can't be happy for you. Go to America. If you're doing better than me, I'm happy for you. I want to be as successful as you.
How do I do it?
How do I do it?
Yeah.
Come to Australia. You're a tall poppy. How do I cut you down, tear you down? I don't want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's just the cultural setting.
100%. And it's so wrong, mate. I sit there and, I've got an Aussie mate who's an actor, and he is now over in the US. And he said, mate, I hate coming home. Yeah. He said, I hate it. He said, I much prefer to live over in the US because people over there support your dreams and go, man, cool, man, we can help you. Or we can, here. Nah, it's so...
It's a sad part of our culture, and it's absolutely a true part.
But do you think, mate, it's only come in the last sort of 20 years, you reckon? I
don't know, because the Aussie battler, right? Everyone was out here having a go and making a life for themselves. That's the whole, spirit of Australia. But, yeah, it's certainly really... It is really evident. It's definitely strong. You talk to any of the guys that have, had a little bit of success... And I love to take the piss out of them and call them tactical celebrities. I coined it with Troy Knight, call him the OG tactical celebrity. But you talk to some of these guys and they just, like you've sort of said before this podcast, there's a lot of criticism for people that get out there and have a go and make a go of it successfully. And I think it's more to do with jealousy than it is to do with... Envy's a fucking horrible, horrible thing to be afflicted by. The 48 Laws of Power talks about envy being one of the most insipid and dangerous things that your colleagues and friends can be affected by when they're thinking about you. Better to avoid envy at all costs than have to try and resolve it or deal it. And I think that's what we see in Australia is there are a lot of envious people based on the fact that they believe there's limited resources, which is not the case. But
I think, mate, it's something that you've said as well throughout the podcast, and I know it myself in doing this podcast, writing the book, doing all that I'm doing. It's hard fucking work. it doesn't just fall in your lap and just happen. And you didn't one day just wake up and go and become a tactical police officer. You had to work hard, and mate, I've had to work fucking hard to get to where I am.
Correct. Putting rounds down range and not being prosecuted in a criminal court and tried by 12, and instead to be awarded something as a recognition, that comes from thousands and thousands of repetitions when no one's watching.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not an overnight success. You're a 10-year success scheme that just happens to pop up one day. And I'm not saying that I'm a success. I'm just saying that I was successful in that moment because I put in the work, and that is what is more important, I think, these days than all the bullshit you see on social media.
But I think too, mate, what I've known from you, mate, and you've become a good mate of mine, is that you're a bloody hard worker, mate. Like, I see it with you. Like, we're doing the potty, and you're still on call, mate. It's Christmas holidays, and you're still on call.
Well, I'm not working as hard as some of the boys who are actually deployed, and I take my hat off to all those lads that are out there on the tools working Christmas. I'm certainly not whinging about having to pick up a phone, but I am sure I'm still working. Like, I'm writing, I'm doing all sorts of different stuff.
100%. And mate, this is the part of the podcast that I want to get into, because you've been at the coalface, and I want to talk to and get your opinion, because you've been at the coalface, is like, mate, why have we as a society, and why has policing gone so woke? And what is it, mate? Why has it changed from what policing used to be when I was a kid? If you as a police officer come to me and said, Adam, move on, I listened and go, yes, sir, I'll move on. Why has that changed, mate?
With security, in the security industry, often it's a knee-jerk reaction. We need more security because something's happened. A crisis has emerged. There wasn't someone there to catch us. We fell. Something broke. Australia is such a safe nation. So incredibly safe, and so are so many other nations that aren't at war, right? That law and order has become, to a degree, so easy to attack as the only thing for people without a cause to attack, because it's something that stands up against what they want to believe in for whatever reason. I don't know, left, right, whatever, conservative, progressive, whatever. But I think the reason it's become so woke driven in regards to how it's prosecuted in the court of public opinion is because there's nothing else for people to attack. The police are this like ephemeral them. They are the ones that held us down. They are the ones that stood in our throats. The BLM movement in America being echoed over here in Australia. I totally get it. Northern Territory Police, like when I was still in the police, Commissioner Kershaw apologised for a mass murder of Aboriginal people as a result of Northern Territory Police actions in the 60s. Like, I get it. Well, not 60s, maybe a little bit earlier, but I get it. I totally understand. There's some carryover and narrative there that is really, really disgusting and bad. But if you attack the police, you've got to remember one thing. All people that are granted the office of constable or deputy or sheriff are granted it by the people. The police are the people. And you are there to enforce the law and order that society needs to live by so that it can go about carrying out its capitalist function. And ultimately, we're a capitalist society. We're not communists. And so we need to have law and order in order to be able to get by. Governments swell. Like, in periods of abundance, governments absolutely swell. They take up more and more resources. And the problem with that is that you've got people that aren't earning their own money. They're spending other people's. And when you don't have to think about how you generate revenue for your paycheck every second Thursday, it is very easy to become progressive and left-leaning. And I think address the needs of the upper class versus support those who need it at the lower end of the spectrum. And for all those that are living in affluent environments where they're not faced with going to Kangaroo Camp and dealing with a 400-person riot because, there's no food on the ground and everyone's been drinking and gambling, just remember that these are the people that need it. The people that need protection are often the ones that are committing the offences because they come from homes of trauma. So, defunding the police, attacking the police, go for it. But then all you're going to be left with is a lawless society. And I think it's fucking mad that people do it.
100. And, mate, I think too, most people's engagement with police, if you look at it, is a traffic cop. It's the
Yeah,
first
correct.
line
It's the
of
jury
it's the first line of, and he pulled me over,
Yeah.
or she pulled me over, and I was dropping the kids off. I'm paraphrasing this,
Correct,
but
yeah.
but their first initial dealings with police is either the traffic cop that's pulled them over,
Yep.
and then they view the opinion of all cops are shit. I
Yeah,
hate
correct.
cops, and
Yeah.
because that cop has treated them badly or poorly or whatever it is, mate, there is some genuine good police in the
Absolutely. And here's the more appropriate point to that. If you're pulled over by police, or if you have a police interaction and you're held to be someone who's done the wrong thing and you get spoken to, given a ticket, prosecuted, have the balls to have the accountability to own up to your own fuck up and action. Don't hold it against them because they caught you, because you're just the 5-year-old child that got caught in an adult's body.
Mm-hmm.
So often the problem is that people can't actually be accountable for their own actions and go, oh yeah, I fucked up.
100%. They don't own it.
They don't own it, and this is where it's easy to attack the police, because it's much, much easier to say, I'm pro left-wing progressive agenda, and fuck the police, they're trying to hold us down, they're just a mechanism of the state, than it is to go, oh no, actually I am a dickhead and I have been carrying on like an absolute pork chop. Or perhaps have the gumption to get into politics, and instead of being some arse clown that throws bottles of piss at police officers that are just going home to their families at night, go and get involved in a political party, actually do the work, generate revenue so you can campaign effectively, and then change the status quo. Don't be some lazy fuck that finds it easier to protest. Go and actually do something about it.
Oh, don't get me started, mate. Those riots down in where those poor old police in Victoria, mate, when that summit was on, mate. Like, seriously?
That's a classic, right? You got progressives turning up, or people turning up, protesters turning up to campaign and bitch and whinge about something they don't have no idea about. They haven't taken the time. There's something about, if I hate a man, for me to like him, I best learn about him. If I'm ignorant of something, then I'm intolerant because I haven't learnt about it. If I don't want to hate something, then I need to learn about it, and I'll change my perspective. That doesn't happen anymore. It's just easier to throw mud.
And unfortunately, mate, too, mud sticks. And,
of course
it sticks, and it takes a lifetime to build a reputation. It takes a second to destroy it. And it doesn't matter. And as you say, it doesn't matter now, regardless of whether that's true or not. People form an opinion straight away. And it's like, as you say, it's easy to blame police for, take accountability. It's an
established authority, right?
100%.
It's easy to blame an established authority. It's easy to say it's dad's fault that I am the way I am, or it's mum's fault that I am the way I am.
No, you need to take personal...
Own it.
100%. And
don't give other people the power.
Mate, but it's very hard, mate, in today's world when we've got leaders of our country that aren't leaders and don't take accountability for their actions either.
Correct. So if you've got... look, that goes back to that leadership conversation, right?
100%.
The high performers don't rise; they sink to the level of the lowest performers being accepted. You want to have a high performing team, high performing country, high performing whatever. I'm not the leadership expert. I'm studying it. Maybe one day I will be. But you need to have people that can accept accountability, responsibility, like in the extreme sense. Go full Jocko.
Yep, 100%, mate. 100%. Mate, what advice would you give to any young person out there who is looking to join the police? Because it has changed. Policing has changed now. And as I mentioned, we've gone into this very woke policing now. And what advice would you give to any young player out there who's thinking of joining the police?
I would go back to what Jed taught me, and that is, if you can't have an eidetic memory, then do the work to remember things verbatim. If you can't look at a piece of legislation and learn it word for word, then know your legislation inside and out, and just read and learn that verbatim till you know what the legislation says word for word, because regardless of someone's opinion and agenda, they cannot argue with knowledge. And if you have got the knowledge of the legislation behind you, you will outdo any average punter you come across. And if you want to be a successful police officer, it's all about covering your ass.
Dotting the I's and crossing the T's, mate.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that get you in trouble. It's getting on the piss, it's doing bad paperwork, and usually the other one is the other gender.
Or as you say too, is excessive force sometimes. That, as you said right at the end of your career in podcast 1, where it was you just that little bit of excessive force.
Yeah, look, I know that when I left the job, I was under a hell of a lot of stress, like, with what was going on at home with Melinda, the businesses, everything, right? Like, I knew at a certain point after, the application of force on a job that I was probably heading towards getting in trouble. And I made a decision to leave at the right time for a bunch of different reasons.
And look, mate, I bring that up, and I don't bring that up in malice at all.
No, yeah.
It's with a cheeky smile to you because, mate, I think we need to go back to that of using force again and not being afraid to use force. And it was interesting because I spoke to the tactical police officer over in Perth.
Yeah.
And he couldn't believe it, mate, that these two general duties, they were in Perth one day and they were assisting general duties.
Yeah.
This shitbag spat in the face of the cops, and then the tactical boys jumped out, used force, got them down, arrested him, and they go, "Oh, can you do that?" And they go, "Yes, you're police officers, use force." And that's the problem, the difference in you guys being at the sharp end to where woke policing is.
Yeah, and the Jacks out there at the moment, the Johnnies on the spot that are driving the divvy vans around. Very much like towards my career, I went to a siege in Alice Springs, and all the boys were on the fence of this siege, and no one had any tools out, and they're all just. I was like, "There is a fucking siege going on. Get your gun out." And like I'm talking to junior connies, probationary connies, and they're just terrified that if they draw their firearm, they're going to have to fill out a use of force form for data collection, and then the department's going to butt fuck them because they got their gun out without someone saying they could. So I was like, "Sure, I'm telling you, as a tactical police officer, pull your firearm out, provide lethal cover for me. We're going to resolve this hostage situation," right? You talked about the stabbing before in Sydney. That was a commissioned officer that went in and dealt with that problem, right? Mm-hmm. That's not a junior copper. Where were the junior coppers? Why was it a commissioned officer that was the first one to the scene? Probably because, well, I know resources probably not available. Like a lot of junior coppers these days are terrified of doing something that they're going to get charged for and lose their job because why? They're trying to pay off a mortgage, or they've got kids in childcare, or they've got a personal loan they've got to repay. And so, the department hunts them down. Cops, especially in the Territory after what happened with Zach Rolfe.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
Mate, that switched from being proactive policing to
a witch hunt.
Policing by requirement. We're only going to respond to jobs when we have to. You're going to prosecute police officers? Why would they respond to jobs?
Oh, mate, and I know Zach well. He's a mate of yours, and mate, and this is the thing of where we've gone so far. Like,
well, here's the comparison that I would like to throw out there. Friday afternoon, I shoot an offender with an edged weapon trying to murder a police officer. Mm-hmm. Somewhat circumstances a little bit different. Not a confined space. He's on the move. It's very clear. He didn't stab anyone yet. I stopped him. I shot him. I get given a Commissioners Commendation for that. Zach Rolfe is involved in a shooting where an offender stabs a police officer, inflicts harm with the intent to cause serious or lethal permanent consequences. Mm-hmm. Zach shoots him. Sure, the difference is that old mate passes. Zach also provides him critical first aid until the guy passes away. Mm-hmm. Sure, the way it was handled is, circumstantially very different. However, he gets tried in the court of public opinion, and here's the critical difference. When I fired on that offender that day, there was a Liberal Conservative Chief Minister in the Northern Territory. When Zach fired on that offender that day, there was a Labor or Progressive Left-Wing Chief Minister for the Northern Territory. That Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, then went down to that community and said consequences will flow. He breached the separation of powers in the Westminster system, and when he breached that system of separation, he basically set the standard that Zach was going to be prosecuted by. Completely unacceptable, and that is probably the best way to display why policing has gone left-wing and woke, because cops are afraid that the parliamentarians that are in power are going to step in and butt fuck them. That is the biggest difference.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, mate. Like, and that's where I look at it and go, you've got two situations, not too dissimilar at all. The only thing is a couple of different...
there's a couple of circumstantial factors,
factors.
Totally.
But, as you said, You get a
I got a
commendation, and he gets.
He's going through coronial, and there's a heap of shit. There's so many differences between them, but I guess no politician intervened in the shooting that I was involved in. Someone did in Zach's, and that's changed the entire game.
Yeah.
Because there's been a breach of separation of powers, and that is where I think that left-leaning woke agenda is. They feel like they can break the rules if it's conveniently aligned with what they want to push as a narrative. Whereas conservatives in general will be like, the standard is set, the separation of powers exists for a reason, we have to maintain that.
100%. And I think too, I know this will sound controversial, mate, is would there have been as much fuss if Zach had shot a white person to being a Aboriginal person?
Well, it's a good question. And I think, he would be the sort of test in my mind. Is the guy that I shot was African. He was black, but he was African. Nothing came of it. I don't know. I would hazard a guess that if for instance, the Northern Territory most recently came to notoriety because there was an active armed offender, didn't quite classify as an active shooter because I think they need to kill 7 or 12. Or there's a special number that makes it an active shooter, which is fucking retarded because this guy killed 3 or 5 people or something. And that didn't get anywhere near the same notoriety as what Zach's did. I think timing is everything in life. Serendipity, I spoke about it before. There was the BLM movement going on for what had happened over in America at the time, and then Zach's shooting sort of went down, and he was in trouble because the court of public opinion was on full trial mode, and he was a perfect Australian scapegoat for it. So that those with an agenda could push it for themselves.
And what people don't realise, mate, is Zach shot the offender, then administered first aid till he passed away.
Yeah.
And what people don't realise is he's a decorated...
Mate, he's a decorated hero.
100%.
Like, he's not only in a police sense, he's decorated as a police officer, he's also decorated in a civilian sense because he's actually saved people's lives, putting himself in harm's way. Yeah, he might have fucked up with a couple of things he said, but, who doesn't? I'm sure... If you went back through all the shit I've said and done, I'd be fucking cooked.
100%. Mate, so would a lot of us.
So would most Aussies. Yep. Most young Aussies would be fucking cooked.
Mate, you think when we're in our early 20s, mate, oh God.
How...
Mate.
I don't even go that far back. I'll go back 20 minutes.
But that's the thing, mate, and that's what I try and get across with these podcasts is that policing, being a first responder, being a veteran, it's a different world to a normal 9-to-5 job, mate. What first responders see, and this is why, mate, I wanted to get you on, because, mate...
I'm telling half the stories about the Benny Hill show. I'm telling 5 fifths of fuck all of the stuff that I did in the Territory, but I'll tell you, no one that I know has ever fucking chased a police car down the Stewart Highway except for Stu Eddy, right? Like, that's epic.
Yeah, 100% it is.
That's not your everyday job.
No, it's not. And that's exact. And to go, as you're saying with your shooting, to go from 5 minutes having a coffee, checking out the babes, to then bang, all within 10 minutes, I've shot someone 3 times.
Life's critical life-saving first aid.
That's how the job can go from 0 to 100.
Correct.
Very quickly.
Correct. And you know what's really good is at the end of your career, there's absolutely nothing for you. You get your superannuation. There's no defined benefit scheme. There's no Department of Veterans Affairs to pick up the pieces and help you. There's no health services. There's no nothing. You come out of the police, you come out of the fireys, you come out of the ambos, and you are as naked as the day you went in.
You're probably more mentally fucked, but
totally.
But I'll say this to you, mate, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. I know you are as well from when we did the first podcast. Mate, in your opinion, what more needs to be done in the way of support for first responders?
I think it needs to be nationalised. I think the only way forward for actual, genuine, empathic care of first responders is a nationalised service that actually addresses all of the shit they go through. I would never take anything away from anyone that served in the Defence Force and their entitlements. I believe they should get everything that they get. I absolutely think that it needs to be duplicated to give and show respect for the people that provide service civilly.
100%.
And there is nothing that is established to do that. And not a single association has stood up for what it's worth and made that happen yet. And I don't think it will until you get some possessed motherfucker like me who gets fully retarded and goes in on it.
I'll support you.
Yeah, and goes into government with the intent to create a department for it. Maybe someone does it before me going back into politics in 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I tell you right now, that's what needs to happen.
But I think too, mate, what frustrates me is that, yes, I understand, mate, that I joined to give of service, and I understand that there was trauma that was going to be associated with that.
Yeah.
But I'm not asking for a gold card. I'm not asking for a pension. I'm just simply asking, give us a white card to get our
just some recognition. Right?
Or even just get our our mental, like go and see the psychologist and physio, mate. If they gave me that card to say this is what. Mate, I'd be happy. And
I think that's what I'm sort of going towards. Is it doesn't necessarily need to be our category of our thing, but it needs to be something that's done to recognise the service that's given and the sacrifices that are made. You know, the amount of cops that give up
National
families.
Day, mate.
Well, yeah, well, bring on a national. We've got the 29th of September, right? Police Remembrance Day. What else is there?
Well, for police, fireys don't have it. Yeah, we don't have a national day. We don't have anything.
We're the one-fingered service, right? Everyone waves at us with one finger.
Yeah.
For the fireys, you're the five-finger service. Everyone waves at you with a full hand. Everyone loves the fireys. And that's cool, but PFAS, asbestos, fucking whatever other chemicals that fireys get exposed to, I don't know. All the shit that's coming out with the COVID vaccines that guys have lost their jobs forced to go through. There just needs to be something, and it doesn't exist at the moment, and it's sad. It's sad that no one's had the gumption to take it upon themselves to actually to do what's necessary to support police officers. Because I tell you what, the recruitment and retention of police officers is
worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide is appalling, and
it's only going to get worse.
Of course. I wouldn't encourage my daughters to go and serve. Not in the police. I'd say go to the army, go to the Air Force, go to the Navy. Don't go to Space Force or the police force. You know, why? Why go and give it up?
And that's, mate, there lies the problem, is that, mate, more needs to be done because, as you said, Christmas Day, you lost another
brother from the blue line.
The blue line.
And I would hate to think however many more around the country are facing that same turmoil.
Well, mate, I look at it they've just finished the Royal Commission into veteran suicide.
Yeah.
Mate, maybe they need to have a look at police and firers and first responders.
I reckon the moment they turn that one over, they'd shit themselves because 100%. There'd be that much that needs to be done. It would be absolutely terrifying for the government coffers.
And this is, as I say, mate, take nothing away from our veteran, brothers and sisters. I'm simply saying that we've both got skin in the game here with being first responders. The numbers are alarming, mate. It's every single day. Like the other day, a South Australian fiery took his life.
Yep.
The other day, like just before Christmas as well.
Yep.
Mate, when is something going to be done? Like, what does it take you and me to? Well, I'm not going into politics, but I mean,
that's pretty much what it's going to take, mate.
100%. Is people like you say of Andrew Hasty, Phil Tom, Jackie Lambie,
the
ones that have actually done service and not been in the system their whole lives and never had a job outside of their career politicians.
Yeah, correct.
They've actually given them service and they know what it's like to struggle.
After World War II, the majority of politicians that came into positions of responsibility in Australia were people that had served. Mm-hmm. We're so far from that right now. The sense of service and the sense of those that have given or paid the ultimate price or know someone that's paid the ultimate price is 5 fists of fuck all. You couldn't count them on your hand, right? The number of people that have actually been in that environment, I reckon, throughout Australian parliaments, in each and individual
100%.
respective parliament. That's got to change, because if you don't have people that are prepared to be of service in the first instance, and they're just geared political animals from the moment they get indoctrinated at a young age, they're not representing the community. They're not representing what Australia stands for. They're representing their own personal interests, and this goes back to that narcissistic, self-endearing, egotistical asshole.
Well, someone that I will throw in, mate, as well, who actually knows of Peter Dutton. He was a police officer. He was a police officer. Okay, yes, he's been in politics a long time, but he's still done of service.
Mate, I remember meeting Peter Dutton for the first time. I was working with Natasha Griggs. I was her chief of staff. She was the administrator for Christmas and Cocos Keeling Islands. We flew to Canberra for some meetings. This is all before COVID kicked off, and I walked into Dutton's office. He was a Minister for Home Affairs at the time, so very, very, very involved in where we were. And the first thing he does is obviously say hello to Natasha. She, more status and more responsibility. She mattered, not me.
Yeah.
But he turns
You
to me.
matter, mate.
Yeah. No, I didn't matter. I was just a fucking advisor. But he turns to me, hand straight out. G'day, Ben. How you going? Like the dude took the time to just know that there was someone else in the room. Like whether it's me or it's someone else, I don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
But he's a minister of government in one of the highest Crown associated ministerial positions, taking the time to just learn that there's someone else in the room. That's a 1%er. That matters. But it comes from a guy who, is sharp as a tack as a detective, and then has gone into the political world because he realises, probably the same reason I did with policing, you actually can't affect that much change. It's just it's the same revolving door for the same jokers and retards, but really you have to go into politics if you want to try and affect legislative change.
100%. And I was talking to someone the other day about Dutton as well. Mate, he didn't need to go into. He's a very successful businessman too. He's very, very sharp. Doesn't need. But he said, I just want to give a service. Yeah,
and bloody good on him.
That's mate. We need more.
Absolutely.
And we need more in there that are actually going to do the same thing. And I mean, look, mate, we could spend another 4 hours talking about.
You ramp me up about politics. It's in my blood, mate.
Yeah, I know, mate. I know. But I mean, we're not going to solve the way of the world, mate. Unfortunately,
we don't have enough beers.
No, we don't. We don't. We're going to crack one in a minute. But, mate, what are your plans going forward with you and your family into the future?
Yeah, for me, it's really become about getting quality time with the family. So that is all about actually spending attentive time where we can get engaged in things. So, whether it's hiking or surfing, going to the beach, whatever, getting engaged in activities, taking them to sporting events, that sort of stuff. Whenever I'm home, I still travel a hell of a lot. Personally, I'm keen to finish my Masters in Leadership. I'm going into a whole bunch of stuff around that. So I'm trying to develop some training on sort of in-house training for us around what I'm learning from that. And then for Panoptic Solutions, it's about taking us from being a executive protection firm in Australia and New Zealand and turning us into the industry leading authority for close personal protection in the private space, which I am very confident we will do. We've got the team, we've got the resources, we've got the manpower, we've got the clientele. It's just about cementing that and just demonstrating to people we are the best choice as a trusted partner in the APAC region. I'm completely committed to that. We're researching different things. For instance, we've just brought out these TAC life belts out to Australia. They're made in the UK by a former South African / UK military veteran. And they use an Australian AED, the cell core, or I can never remember, live cell lev, I can't remember it. AED, personal AED device. And we've taken those and we've sent one down to the PM's team for DigPro, right? They already had the AEDs, but they didn't have the belt packs. It's about being that industry-leading authority that people can turn to and say, oh, that's what the standard is in the EP firms. That's what people expect. That's what we're going to deliver. For me, all of my attention is focused on how can we make Panoptic the absolute greatest firm in the space that it can be for the region that we operate in.
Absolutely. And, mate, I think, I can see the passion. I can see it light up in your, and I saw that passion when you were talking about being a tactical police. I can see it now in what you absolutely believe in your brand.
Mate, I believe in it because, one, we believe in the people behind it. We recognise, we acknowledge and we support, we train, we pay for guys to do courses, we get them, we care about our team. And because we care about our team, I know we're going to be a great organisation because we've got great leaders, we've got great employees, and we've got a great culture in that operation.
Because you use both now, you've got that transition for veterans and first responders,
sure.
Don't you?
Yeah, mate. We we're not selective and so fraternity based that we don't accept anyone else. One of the most recent, and I would say probably one of the best hires we've got, is a call responder. So a call taker from the ambulance service, right? That's not your average Joe EP firm hire. And blokes at home would be like, oh, I'm a fucking elite tactical operator. Why'd you hire her? Well, because she's a weapon and she's not going out on the jobs doing the EP. She's running the operations in the back end. She's doing the important stuff that makes the business tick. But she comes from that frontline responder community and she gets it. She gets us. We're lucky to have people amazing like that want to be a part of our organisation, primarily because we care about them.
100%. Exactly, mate. Exactly what you said, where when you go overseas, you get something and bring it back. And we talk about leadership. That's leadership. And that's why people want to work with you, mate.
Yeah, mate. Oh, and we want to work with them. That's the other part of it. We're not so egotistical that we think to ourselves, well, you're lucky for working with us. We're like, oh man, I can't believe I've got this awesome human being that wants to work with us. Do they have to be a tip of the spear, tier 1 SF, elite tactical operator or Harry Hardcunt? No, I don't need that. But I just want someone that gives a shit and will do the extra work.
And they've got to have a good work ethic.
Yeah.
And, mate, that could be the normal grunt from infantry, mate. Like, it doesn't have to be the SF dude.
No. Yeah, like, being special forces versus ordinary forces doesn't make much of a difference in my mind, other than the fact that some are prepared to do the work. And
100%.
That's what we look for.
100%. And, mate, what do you... So you've said that you're doing this personally going forward. What are you doing now? Like, are you doing some writing? You wrote a book.
Yeah, mate.
We'll
Yeah,
talk
I've
about
done a
that in
couple.
minute. Yeah.
I've done a couple. Funny, nothing published because I don't have a publisher. But
I could put you in touch with them, mate.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I actually wrote a children's book, primarily because I'm away from the kids. Right, it's all about self-resilience. So that's like a little maritime themed self-resilience book for the kids that I put on YouTube, so they can listen to that. It's only an hour long, so nothing special. But I did that. I've got the podcast Wheels Up. I'm writing another book at the moment. I've got a autobiography that I've been working on in the background. I've got a couple little chapters that I've got going with that. Some funny stories. Not really sure. I'm thinking maybe like You Wouldn't Fucking Believe It as a title.
Mate, good title.
Maybe just the Benny Hill Show. So doing that, and then doing the study, mate. Doing the university. So
yeah, nice.
That's the hard part. Yeah.
Nice, mate. And how do people follow you if they want to follow you and
I'm
follow all your antics of things
I'm
that
a
you do?
massive LinkedIn pest.
Yep.
I'm all over LinkedIn, so flick me a connection request if you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Just Ben Hosking. I'm on Instagram and the standard socials, Facebook, that sort of stuff. But yeah, LinkedIn is where I do most of the professional stuff. I do a lot of writing, articles, opinion pieces, so on and so forth. Do a couple of contribution pieces, and happy to do more for anyone that wants one.
Yep. And mate, if some police want to get in touch with you, just reach out and just in that transition.
Always happy to have a conversation with coppers. I probably have 2 or 3 on the regular each week, whether or not they're just directions on where to go. I had a good chat with a fella from CERT the other day, just talking about what's out there afterwards. There's a big gap between knowledge of what is in the private enterprise space out here versus the .gov space. So I'm more than happy to have that real conversation.
And there, mate, as you say, to all police out there is, and all first responders.
Any first responder. Yeah,
there is life outside of the uniform. You will always, as you said, you still bleed blue. You will always bleed blue.
Absolutely.
It's like me. I bleed yellow, and like
red.
Red and yellow. That's
that's not just the shapes. That's the fire. It's the emergency services coming out.
That's right. But mate, there is a life outside of service too.
There is. The golden handcuffs are dangerous because they trap people into thinking they have to stay there. The reality is you were something once upon a time before you were in the role that you're in, and you need to know you've got the skills and capabilities to go out there and make successful decisions in the private world. You just have to be prepared that you're going into a different game.
100%. Well, Ben, it's been an absolute honour, mate, to sit here and go and record again, mate. And mate, I want to thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for the work that you do for first responders and veterans. And mate, you're an absolute legend. Keep just killing it and doing what you're doing, mate. And yeah, let's crack a beer, mate.
Cheers, AB.
Cheers, mate.
We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.